The meeting will start in 1 minute. If then. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Nebraska State Board of Education February 2nd meeting. And I am on the wrong page. Okay. Let's see. Good. Board members, please engage your microphones before speaking and turn them off when you're finished speaking. Please note that board members may be using their cell phones and laptop computers to access agenda and information related to the meeting. Live streaming is available through the State Board of Education website. Would the recording secretary please call the roll?
Patsy Kojans.
Here.
Lisa Fricke.
Here.
Patty Goobles.
Here.
Jacqueline Morrison.
Here.
Kirk Penner.
Here.
Sherry Jones.
Here.
Elizabeth Tegmeyer. Deborah Neary.
Here.
Commissioner Maher.
Here.
7 present, 1 absent.
Okay. All right. Would everyone please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Information regarding the Open Meetings Act is posted as you enter the room from the main entrance doors. The Open Meetings Act is also posted on the State Board of Education's website. Our agenda item 2.1 is CTE month recognition, and our speakers today are Katie Graham and Sydney Kobza. Welcome, Katie.
Good morning. I'm actually just going to introduce some incredible guests that we have invited. Happy CTE Month. Every February nationally, we recognize the incredible opportunities students have to connect their education to their future in the workforce. Today, we have got 3 special guests. We have Dr. Jim Sutphin, who works at the State Chamber and has been an incredible partner through our partnership, the department's partnership with the Chamber, to connect education and business. And then we have a student. We have Mr. Caleb Most, who won this year's extemporaneous speaking competition at the National FFA Convention. And we have Mr. Jesse Zweep, who is a skilled and technical sciences educator at Louisville Public Schools and a Skills USA advisor. So each of them have just short remarks to share with you about CTE and their experiences. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Sutphin.
Well, good morning. Appreciate the opportunity to come share some of the work we've been getting done. I want to first start off with saying that I'm a first-generation college graduate. My dad was a steam fitter, and my mom was a secretary. And growing up in the, a long time ago, there was only one choice in our family, and that was with my parents, and that was you would go to 4-year school. You would go get a bachelor's degree. And that's all I grew up knowing. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the work we've been doing around CTE and the great partnership that we've had with the department, and try to dispel some of the myths that maybe are out there that could be helpful. You know, I think we have some tremendously talented students across our state. We have about 25,000 students that start ninth grade every year. They all have dreams and aspirations. And I say start ninth grade because if you take a look in a 10-year window, you use 4 years for high school and 6 years for post-secondary, we see a lot of stopping out along the way. About 35 to 40% of those students end up completing a degree or a workforce license. So that stop out occurs along various points. And what we know today as a state of Nebraska is that there are 4 really significant issues that we have to address if we're going to continue to grow our economy. One of them is childcare. One of them is workforce alignment. One of them is housing. And the other would be immigration. And those goals are really what the state chamber is working on a daily basis, right? We are in conversations all the time about those 4. So what we know also is because we have great students, those great students have the opportunity to have great teachers. And we have some of the best school districts in the country, in our state, and hands down, our kids get an opportunity to do really great things. We also have tremendous business owners. I have yet to meet a business owner, somebody that's a manager in a business that isn't 100% engaged in working on what they're trying to do to provide service to their customers and products for the marketplace. So educators are intensely focused on educating students, and businesses, they're focused on serving their customers. And we're more alike than we are different because of the unique position that was created between the Department of Ed and the State Chamber. I get the opportunity to wake up every day and think about connections. And how do we connect business to education, education to business, K-12 to community college to university, university to K-12. So a couple of things that you may or may not know about Nebraska, and this is where I always try to start whenever I'm presenting. We have a population of roughly 2 million folks. We have a workforce of about a million. We have one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country and the highest labor participation rates in the country. Wasn't too many years ago that the birth rate was about 3.6 for every 2 people. That is now about 1.6. Sustainability of a population requires 2.1. So we know that we are not even replacing the generation of the workforce we have today and we do not have enough population to run the economy we have in Nebraska today because we already have 50,000 open jobs. The state chamber and business and educators all have a vested interest in seeing our students land careers, and that interest engage them and pay them a good salary. We exist, right? We exist to help students choose their dreams to their talents, to their careers. And these H3 opportunities are exactly the type of work the NDCTE team has been working on. And you have some unbelievably passionate people that work in your CTE area. It's hard to not be passionate when you get to work around Katie Graham, who has unbelievable positivity, and her counterpart in Sydney and the work that they do together. The last couple of weeks, we have had 6 meetings across the state with a focus on regionalizing the discussion around CTE. It was a brilliant move by the CTE team to do this because it put a lot of like school districts together to have that conversation about how to use the dollars that have been funded through CTE Nebraska education and through the matching, and through the Perkins money that comes in federally. Was a tremendous win for our state and our kids in CTE last year when the legislature allocated additional resources and created a state match at a level that was more than we'd ever seen before. But front and center at that discussion was a regional landscape analysis. There was lots of conversation around here are the top jobs in this market area that fit the description of high skill, high wage, high demand? And how would that change your CTE program or enhance your CTE programming at your high schools or even at your middle schools? With the 50,000 job openings we have in our state, being able to regionalize this is really significant work. And I think you're going to see more come out of even legislative discussions around regionalizing goals and objectives for the workforce so that we can continue our way of life in Nebraska. I really feel like as educators, and I'm a former educator, retired superintendent, retired school teacher, that we're in the human capital business, right? That's what we're in. We're raising up kids, and our ability to tell them that they matter, I think can be one of the great byproducts of this partnership. The CTSO program that we offer in the state of Nebraska, the Skills USA, FFA, you could go on down the list, Educators Rising, creates opportunities for kids that they may not get in a direct curricular program. It may be co-curricular, but also supports their curricular program. And those touches that kids have in there, and where businesses are now being involved in getting touches with them, tells our students that they matter and that we want to keep them in our state. Our bachelor degree net migration out is about 4,000 Nebraska residents a year. We think we've all called that the brain drain. I think more than ever, our students knowing that they matter and that we want them to be here in the state of Nebraska, and here are the opportunities that are there for you, is again a byproduct of what this partnership can be about. So the other night, and I'm almost done, the other night I was at dinner with a company that had talked about a line of robotics that they put in. And through that line of robotics they put in, they were eliminating 80 positions. They had worked extremely hard at making it so nobody lost a job, right? They put in a hiring freeze. They did some things to allow it to ripple through. That replacement of 80 people with those robotics only said to me, high skill, high wage, high demand jobs. And that our educational programming and the work that we're doing in CTE and the work that the state chamber is trying to help with is a way to fill those positions that are being caused through innovation. And how awesome would it be to be 15 or 16 years old today and know that you could have post-secondary training, whether it's through a degree path, a workforce license, but you could be into a high-skill, high-wage job where you're running robotics, and have a career that that has the ability for social mobility, has the ability for advancement, and can help you live out the American dream. So that's the work we've been doing. You got a great team here at ND, right? The CTE team is phenomenal. And Dr. Maher, your leadership has been very much impressive and needed in our state, and I want to thank you for that. I'd take any questions if you have any.
Okay. Questions?
We'll let the good speaker come up next.
Well, thank you, Dr. Zepfin. Okay. Good morning.
Good morning. All right, my name is Caleb Most. I'm originally from Ogallala, Nebraska, and I'm currently a freshman at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln studying agricultural education with a minor in Spanish. And I'm here today to just talk to you a little bit about my experience with career and technical education. So my experience with CTE began my 8th grade year. That year I took my first agriculture course at my middle school, and I immediately fell in love with agricultural education and really CTE as a whole, because that class that I took, I remember it being so hands-on, so interactive. It was something that I looked forward to every day. It was a class that really stood out compared to a lot of my other ones just because of how interactive it was. And I remembered that I was just able to almost take something home with me every day that I was able to remember, because there were so many memorable experiences in that class. So because I had such a positive experience with my 8th grade Intro to Agriculture class, I continued taking agriculture classes for the rest of my high school career. And those classes ranged from a wide variety of topics. I took classes in natural resources, animal science, plant science, agribusiness, and more. And in those classes, I was able to just gain a wide variety of skills in a lot of areas of agriculture, food, and natural resources. And I was also able to do a lot of career exploration, which was really cool. During high school, I also participated in my high school's FFA chapter for 4 years, and I had so many crazy and amazing experiences through FFA. So I was able to help, along with my classmates, start a school-based cattle company at my high school that we operated for 2 years of my high school career, and then it's still going today. I created my own beekeeping business and honey business with the assistance of my FFA advisor and a community mentor. I attended leadership workshops where I was able to grow personally and learn about leadership and teamwork. And then I was also able to participate in a lot of different competitions, including veterinary science, agricultural sales, parliamentary procedure, and then my favorite, extemporaneous speaking. So last May at the Nebraska State FFA Convention, I was named the state champion in extemporaneous speaking, which was really just a crazy experience in itself. It had always been a goal of mine to win a state championship in FFA, because then you get the opportunity to compete at the national convention in Indianapolis. And so I competed in Indianapolis this last November, and honestly, I was just happy to be there. I mean, I was a college freshman, I had a lot going on in my life. I had done as much preparing as I could, but I was just happy to be there to compete and to represent our state. But even though I was just happy to be there, I kept advancing through the rounds until ultimately I was named the national champion in extemporaneous speaking in FFA, which was honestly such a great, thank you. Yeah, it's honestly still surreal to this day. It's so crazy that happened. But although my FFA and my ag classes prepared me for competitions, they also prepared me for a little bit more than just high school competitions. So in the classroom, in my ag business and ag leadership classes, I was able to learn about creating a cover letter, writing a resume, preparing for an interview, which are skills that I've used a lot since graduating. I was able to learn about teamwork by being a chapter officer and how to work on a team and be a leader. And I was also able to learn a lot about financial management and record keeping through our school-based cattle company. So I was able to just gain a lot of skills through my ag classes. But I think the most important thing that I was able to do in those classes and in my FFA experience was just explore a ton of agricultural careers and be exposed to those. My time in FFA and ag ed really is what has led me to pursue agricultural education. It really grabbed my interest. But it was also really cool to see a lot of my classmates explore careers in agriculture. I had a couple friends that took some ag classes with me who grew up in town and had no agricultural background at all. And now because they took those classes, they're here at UNL pursuing careers in agriculture. They felt like they had a place in agriculture that maybe they wouldn't have known about if they hadn't taken those classes or if they hadn't participated in FFA. And I just think that's really cool and really important work that agriculture, food, and natural resource classes are doing and that FFA is doing in our state. And even for the students who were in those classes that didn't end up pursuing careers in agriculture, at the very least they were able to gain some foundational knowledge about agriculture, food, and natural resource systems that makes them a more well-rounded person, and that's knowledge they can use for the rest of their life. So my time in FFA and agricultural education was invaluable, frankly. I had so many amazing experiences, and I'm so thankful for my time in that organization and in those classes. And so during this Career and Technical Education Month, I would just encourage you to look around at all of the wonderful things that CTE organizations like FFA, FBLA, FCCLA, DECA, and more are doing in our great state by even just looking it up online, because CTE classes and organizations are really doing some great things in our state and are impacting the lives of high school students. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Let's see. Yeah.
Yeah, do you have any questions?
Oh, yes, or comments at least.
Yeah.
May I?
Please.
May I? So, Caleb, I appreciating seeing the traditional blue jacket. FFA has been around a long time, and I'm just kind of surprised they still have that dashing blue jacket. But that's your agricultural education with a minor in Spanish. May I ask what your future hopes or dreams or plans are?
Yeah, absolutely. So my goal right now is just to be a high school ag teacher, but the reason I have the minor in Spanish is just there's such a growing population of Spanish-speaking students. Even in my hometown, I experienced that, and then also through doing some observations. Last semester, in my ag ed class, we had to get 30 observation hours in various schools across the state, and I even just experienced then many students who only spoke Spanish, and so I think that I guess that's where my minor comes in, is I think that just because some students only speak Spanish, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't get an agricultural education. So I'm hoping to be able to communicate with them as well.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, you stole my thunder. I was hoping you would go into education. You'll do very, very well. And in your position as a freshman at the university, encouraging your classmates to go into that profession as well. I mean, you could sell anything just by how you speak, but I would really, really look forward to you being a teacher and encouraging others to join you in that pursuit. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
So, after we heard Dr. Suffin speak, something that I work on every day in my day job is we know that our population is not growing at the rate we need it to, but that also means we can't afford to lose anyone. We can't have any brain drain. We can't have anyone lose the state or leave the state. And so I'm just curious, what are the things that we need to be doing to make sure that we keep students like you here, and what are the things that your peers are looking at when they're deciding to graduate? Am I going to stay in Nebraska? Am I going to go somewhere else? What are those conversations like, and how do we make sure that people like, or students like you, don't leave?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think that a lot of the things that I guess I hear for students who are leaving the state is just that they don't feel like there's opportunities for them in their careers here in Nebraska. And so, I mean, whether that's true or not, I think one of the things I guess that could be done to help keep people here is just to continue highlighting all of the opportunities that there are in Nebraska, even in small towns, for a wide variety of careers. I mean, I think a lot of people think that they have to go to a bigger city or they have to go to a state with a larger population to be able to live out the dreams that they have for their careers. So I guess I would say just highlighting what's going on here in Nebraska. I mean, personally, in my major right now, there's about 20 other agricultural education freshmen right now here at the university. And as far as I know, all of them plan on staying in state. So I guess at least in that factor or faction of people, we're all planning on staying here. But I think it's a lot about just highlighting the opportunities that are available here.
And I have one more question.
Yeah.
So the second thing I got to talk to some people about this week, so I'm so happy you're here, is innovation in ag. And so whether we're looking at ag tech, the technology that goes on in agriculture and on the farms, but also ag security and making sure a lot of the technical components are secure, and just really looking at how do we bridge some of that technology and innovation with the ag industry. So I'm just curious, are you taking classes on some of those topics now? And if not, are there places where you think there are opportunities for us to create curriculum so that you have it, or that other students have it, to be able to be at the forefront of the ag industry?
Yeah, so right now I'm not taking any classes, I guess, that are super into like ag biotechnology or ag security, but that's something that gets talked about, I guess, even in like some of the more basic classes. Like I took a plant science class last semester and I'm in an animal science class this semester. And so there's definitely some biotechnology that gets discussed in those classes just because it relates to those topics. But then there's some upper level classes I know that I'll have to take eventually about those topics. But I guess kind of like you were saying, I mean, there's so many opportunities available in agriculture for people who don't want to just farm or ranch. There's so many careers available with technology as it continues to develop and as we need it to continue to develop. So I guess something that I guess I've talked about before and learned a lot about is if you kind of incorporate some of those like technology concepts relating to agriculture in like a high school science class, that allows it to be exposed to a lot more students than just if those things are being talked about in ag classes, because not every school has an ag program, not every school has ag classes, but every school does have a science program and science classes that are required. So if some of those things can be talked about in the science classes, then it's exposed to more students.
Well, I can tell you're an extemporaneous speaker. You're so fluent, and it just, you answer the question, and then you support it with evidence. But I'm curious, how did you prepare to be an extemporaneous speaker?
Yeah, so I actually, the first extemporaneous speaking I ever did was my freshman year of high school. I was on our high school speech team, and I was not something I wanted to do at all, but my speech coach just told me, you're doing this, you have no choice, go. And I'm very glad that they did now, looking back. But so I was kind of forced into it actually at the start, but then after giving it a couple chances, I really just fell in love with it, and it's something I knew that I guess I was good at and something that I wanted to continue doing. So to prepare for it, the main thing that I do is just go through practice, just do practice rounds. So I was set up, my FFA advisor has a friend here in Lincoln that was able to come to the university and do a couple practice rounds with me, where I was able to, there's resources available of like past national FFA extemp topics. So I randomly chose a couple of those, did 30 minutes of preparation, and then gave my speech in front of him, answered questions from him, and then got some feedback. So really just trying to simulate that environment of extemporaneous speaking as much as possible. And then also just staying up to date with ag issues, things that are happening in the ag industry. And I was able to do a lot of that in my classes actually this last semester, which was really nice. So that's kind of what I do to prepare.
Well, I think I know your teacher, and I can certainly imagine her saying, you're going to do it, you don't have any choice, get going. But it has served you very, very well as far as being an extemporaneous speaker. It's a pleasure to listen to you and to have you here with us.
Thank you.
Caleb, first of all, I think you give us all great optimism for what the future may hold here in Nebraska, so thank you for that. This is a big deal. Winning a state championship is a big deal. Winning a national championship, well, is a bigger deal. Congratulations. That you make us all proud. Can you share with us what your topic was at the national level?
Yeah, would you like to hear all three?
Sure. Yes.
So for there's 3 rounds that I had to advance through at the national competition. So my prelim round, I talked about, I think the question was, what role does agricultural education play in ag literacy? So that was right up my alley, a perfect question for me to have. My second round question was a lot longer and more wordy, but the general idea was, how do farmers and ranchers work with other entities in the food system on sustainability? On sustainability. And then my final topic was, how can farmers and ranchers advocate for the use of pesticides and herbicides and educate the EPA on their importance? Which we had just talked about herbicides and pesticides in my plant science class the week before, so that was also really good timing. Yeah.
That was fabulous. Thank you, Caleb. Really appreciate your time today and all that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you all.
Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Jesse Zweep. As a teacher, I'm always excited to follow up when students do really well like that, so everything is going okay. I'm a teacher at Louisville Public Schools. I teach skills and technical science. I've been teaching for 18 years. I can't tell you, I'm excited to be here today because it's Friday. The weather's nice, so it kind of feels like an episode of Survivor at school, so I'm excited to be here. What I'm here to talk to you about today is the revision grant that Louisville applied for in 2021 and 22 and received. We received a $100,000 grant for our CT program through state and federal funds. And so I just want to give you a little explanation of how that process worked and what we did in our district. And so it was a collaborative effort between our CT teachers, administrators, and most importantly, our community stakeholders. The grant allowed us to really review, align, and improve and expand our CT offerings. And so what we found through this process was that we needed to align our curriculum and our offerings more with our local needs. And a couple of those examples are, we have Ash Grove Cement Company. And so if you've driven on a road in the state, it's come out of Louisville. We don't take any credit for the potholes, but we do. We're proud of the product that we make there. But they needed machinists, they needed welders and electricians, and in a small community, the high school is sometimes a great place to get those. And so we wanted to build a better working relationship with them. We've got Koppel, Chevrolet, and GMC, which sell a lot of vehicles, and so they needed technicians. And so as an automotive teacher, I have 3 periods a day of automotive, so we're trying to get kids to follow that path and work in that industry. We also have some development north of Louisville. A couple big tech companies you might have heard of, Facebook and Google, have built some monstrous buildings up there, and they need people to do their electrical, their plumbing, but it's also the infrastructure. The housing is just going crazy. You can't find places to live and build. And so we're seeing now that these companies are coming to our school districts wondering, how do I get kids into the housing industry, how to be carpenters, how to be electricians and plumbers. And so it was a neat opportunity for us to reflect on those things. We found that maybe we needed to do some more work-based learning. We've had kids that go out in their afternoons, if they're caught up on their credits, they can go work, but it wasn't very formal. And so we've started to implement that. We did have we have a lot of variety. We do have family consumer science, business, and we do have SDS in Louisville. So we have a wide variety that meet our students' needs. So through the revision grant, what we did find is we do have students that are going out and doing work-based learning now. They might work at the bank, they might work at the Koppel dealership, but they're actually earning credits. They're coming back. They're reporting. There's someone that comes in and follows up with them. And so that's a neat offering or opportunity for them. We added a home maintenance and construction course, which is actually a pretty popular course. We teach plumbing, electrical, drywall, masonry, and so students, it's a semester course where they'll do that, and then the other semester they go and they learn to build a shed and to do the framing part of it. What we found is we have some students with special needs that needed some tangible things to do and life skills, and so we actually have a lot of students that come take that class because it's something that hands-on that they can do, and it's kind of helping them develop a skill that maybe they could take once they leave our building so that they have an opportunity after high school. And so that's been a neat experience for me and them because they found that they really have enjoyed doing some of that work. We added another automotive class because of the need. And it's just not another class. We found that if you have an option of young ladies who want to take automotive and they have to be in a class with 15 adolescent boys, they're not too excited about it. So when you add another class and all their friends, they go to the council, they get it figured out, they go, hey, we can be in 3rd period autos together. And now I have a class that are more young ladies and they're learning to be automotive technicians. It's a pretty powerful thing. So I'm excited for that. We also were able to modernize a lot of our equipment. When I started in Louisville, I had 2 pieces of a metal lathe. One was a World War II surplus Atlas, and the other one was from the early 60s. They're still working great, but through the grant, we were able to purchase some new equipment that has CNC capabilities that you would see in the modern workforce today. And so just to give you an idea of what some of that cost might be for a district without this grant, the CNC, the lathe was $18,000, and we also received a plasma cutter to be able to do some manufacturing items was $28,000. So this grant really helps to provide some of those big ticket items and some top-notch equipment that students would be able to use when they enter the workforce. And then finally, I put down here, it's important to note that when we work with these business and industry people, they're not just sponsors that you might see on a sports program. If I need help with something, I have a direct line to somebody that I can call. That partnership through this revision grant has really allowed us to meet people through all the business and industry areas that there's a lifeline for teachers. I'm not an expert in everything, but it's nice to be able to call and get something. And the other part of it is the consumables part. We go through a lot of welding electrodes and metal and gases, and that can be a burden on school districts. And so having these partnerships, I don't have to purchase any of that. Ash Grove just donates their metal to us. So it's a huge benefit for our school district and our students. And then finally, we found out that we needed to reach more students in the middle school and elementary levels for CTE. And we chose to do that through our CTSO Skills USA. And so now during February, we actually go down and I have high school Skills USA members mentor 1st, 2nd, and 3rd graders for a week. And what they did was my students actually developed a careers coloring book. And so they take that and they go down there and they dress up as welders, they dress up as a nurse or whatever it might be, and then they talk to these kids and they mentor them and they explain what it might be and they color with them and they work with them. The innovative part that I thought was cool, it was my students' idea, is when they made the coloring book, instead of putting a man as a welder, they put a woman as it. They put a male nurse. And so they really opened my eyes to how the world they see. And so now we have that. We go to each year. It's a pretty powerful thing too, because now we're seeing these kids in middle school and high school, they're starting to ask more questions. How do I get to be more involved in our CT classes? Let's see. We also, Skills USA also has an opportunity called Action Skills. It's a competition for students with special needs. And last year I had 2 students compete, and one of them placed first. He has an aspiration to be a firefighter. So he brought all of his bunker gear, and his goal was to be able to get dressed and put it all on in 1 minute. And he did. And so he'd worked very hard, plus he had to give his speech and explain each part of it and do it. And then the other one, he really liked the plumbing part. So we take copper pipe, they have to clean it, they cut it, they put the flux on and they solder it, and then we dunk it in water to see if it holds air or has any leaks. And he did that. And so he demonstrated how he did all those things. And so it's a pretty powerful thing to see. We're giving an opportunity to some of those special populations through our CTSOs. So, and I guess in closing here, the revision grant really is a pretty powerful thing for school districts as a lifeline, as you can see. And again, I want to also thank Dr. Katie Graham and Sydney Koza for their efforts. They're really pretty powerful and good leadership. And I'm also very thankful for people like Aaron Jones, who are the director of the CT, and Greg Stair for Skills USA in Nebraska. So any questions from you?
Very quick. Have you noticed an effect on attendance with your expansion of your offerings?
And I guess to the point where it's kind of funny. There's sometimes I have kids that'll come to class because I have autos and metals first early in the morning, and then they'll be there, and then for some reason they leave. They only want to come. They might skip their English class, which is not good. But but yes, in general, it's there. They get out of bed. We put them early in the morning because we want those kids to be there, and so it's actually a good conversation when. If you want to work on your car, you got to be passing other classes. That's my rule, and so it's a motivator to be there. It's a motivator to sometimes stay a little after class to continue to work, and so yeah, it is a pretty powerful thing to have them in there. Yep.
One other. What are your hopes or your next for Louisville's program? What would you like to see?
Well, we're growing. When I started there, I might have had maybe 6 to 8 kids in a class, and now I'm getting 15 to 16, and so our space is kind of getting limited. So, which is a good thing. Louisville's been a great community where it's very supportive of its CT programs, and so we're just continuing to expand. Again, one day I would like to be able to do like a Habitat for Humanity in Louisville, where we're building those houses, and so serve the community a little bit better in those aspects with our students. So, yeah.
I have to say that I would love to take one of your classes. I don't know how good I'd be at it, but your enthusiasm is infectious and shows all over you, so I imagine that you are one of the best teachers in the school.
Thank you.
And I think that the creativity that you're using to work on first and second graders so that they dream of those jobs, just like our student said, I'm dreaming of this, and you're giving them that opportunity, and plus you're allowing your older students to collaborate with the younger students and say, this is really cool. And so it's building on itself, and we can see that and hear that from you today in here. And I guess as a teacher, that's one of my dreams, that I see more of that in classrooms. So thank you very much.
You bet. And it's funny you mentioned, we have a lot of community people, parents that were like, we would love to take your home maintenance class. So, I'm always looking a way to have a fundraiser for my Skills USA chapter. So maybe we'll have a night class, so, but yeah, it's funny. It's a possibility. So
again, enthusiasm.
Yep.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anybody else on the board? Okay. Mr. Sweet, I just don't even have the words. It's like you inspired me so much with your creativity, your inclusivity, your forward thinking. It's really appreciate all that you're doing, and thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
So, and to all of our 3 speakers, and to our fearless leader who does an amazing job year round. And so thank you to all. We're going to just take a 5-minute break so we can just one-on-one say thanks to our guests here. And so we'll be back is it 9:30? What time is it? We'll be back at 9:45. It's 9:40 right now. So thank you, everybody. We'll convene in 1 minute. All right, we are convening, and we are at agenda item 3. The next item of business is the commissioner's report. Commissioner Maher, please provide your report.
Thank you. First of all, there are 0 items that have identified to be removed from the consent agenda. If board members wish to remove additional items or any items from the consent agenda, please fill out the form at this time. Any items removed from the consent agenda will be taken up under additional business. I have a couple of items to inform the board about this month, and so I would just start by saying good morning. Good morning. Welcome to all of those here and those listening at home. I'm pleased to be able to share a few key points from this last month. First of all, strategic plan. This came up yesterday in conversation, but I want to start by talking about one of the goals that you gave me, which I haven't spoken a lot about yet in the first few months on the job, is the strategic plan. In November, I tasked our NDE officer team with discussing needs and next steps as they pertain to the strategic plan. And our team and I have determined that the best course of action is to breathe life into our current plan. So you will hear that from me in a more formal manner next month. I want it to feel relevant to our staff and to our stakeholders, and I want to reevaluate the plan and let it run its natural course, which culminates in 2026. Again, I'll share a great deal more with you about this next month, but that's a glimpse into what's coming with a more comprehensive update. But here are some actions that I'm taking in the meantime. 1, I'll likely recommend maintaining the current goals, strategies, and roles. And 2, I'll revise our tracking of progress and assign metrics and reporting structure for the next 2 years. Again, that's a teaser for the March meeting. Second update comes with the Superintendent's Advisory Committee. I'm very thankful for the wisdom and the guidance that I get from this group. I shared that with them just this last week as we met for the 3rd time. A few key updates that we talked about with this group. 1, our superintendents focused first on affirming any recommendations they have about the assessment process that we've been going through. That seems to be coming to a logical conclusion before the RFP process. I'm thankful to Dr. Trudy Clark, for all of the work that she's put in to this area, and she leads our assessment team and really has been a steady voice and a steady hand throughout my time here, and I'm sure for months and months and months prior to my arrival at the Department of Education. Second, Dr. Ippenson shared feedback from the accountability process and outlined potential ways we could enhance our state AQuest system. We're just getting knee-deep into that process, looking at what we want it to do and what it's doing right now, and making any changes going forward. We will go through a process on the accountability system, much like the process that we followed through the assessment system, where I have given an initial conversation to the superintendents through the Superintendent's Advisory Council. We'll be meeting with superintendents across the state through ESUs. Also, we'll be meeting with AAAC, NASIA, and those groups who are most closely connected in the school districts with that accountability process. We've got a lot of work to do there. I'm really pleased with the kickoff of those conversations. My advisory council also provided a lot of input on what the certification process does look like and what it might look like. Brad Dirksen came and spoke to the advisory council on what we do right now, what alternative certifications we do right now. I think sometimes it's easy to forget that we do have alternative certifications available right now. And then where can we head in the future to address the issues of workforce and reduce the barriers that we have in the certification process going forward. And then finally, the committee engaged in a discussion of legislative happenings, what bills to watch, and perceptions of bills and school district stances or ESU stances on some of those bills where we might not be taking a stance at the Department of Education. Also, I was able to share what our process looks like for taking stances and advocating for or against bills. I noticed that Dr. Schwartz from Millard and Dr. Plaus from Bennington are here. They are two members of the Advisory Council. And I suspect they're just here to see if I'm telling you the truth or not. Thanks for your attendance. Finally, in the legislature, speaking of the legislature, as I did with the Advisory Council, I'll round out my report by saying I've been encouraged with our agency's responsiveness and engagement with the legislature. I don't know that it's any different than the past, but I know from the last month with the legislature being in session, I'm pleased with our response as a department. Our team, led by Deputy Commissioner Halstead and also Lane Carr and Tammy Berry et al., really do a very good job, I believe, in doing the careful analysis of bills, fiscal impacts that comes from Bryce Wilson and his department, and informed advice to give to me and ultimately to you so that you can make decisions on bills that are in front of us legislatively. We've been very active in the legislature. We've testified at several hearings so far. We've written several letters of support, and we've been providing advice behind the scenes to legislators and to their aides. And we have a really busy week coming up that is the precursor to a very busy month coming up. That concludes my report.
All right, thank you, Dr. Maher. Any questions? Jackie?
This is more a comment rather than a question, but I know when you said next month, you will present on your recommendation for the strategic plan. When we receive that report, can you also speak about the ideal time to start working on the next strategic plan? Because I understand if this one runs its course through 26, there's probably some time in 25 or 26 that we'll have to start working on the next one. So I think it'll be just good to hear if that is the initial recommendation, how we would start the process of creating the next one.
I should just say yes, but I will tell you that is part of the presentation as I've begun to put that together. So yes.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner. We can move to agenda item 4, the President's Report. I'm reporting that there is no President's Report, so that was fast. Agenda 5.1 is public comment period. We will now move to our public comment period. This period may be made available to any person who wishes to address the State Board on any subject within its authority, including items appearing on the agenda, except for contested cases. Up to 2 hours will be allowed for the public comment period. A majority of members present and voting may also take action to allow or terminate public comment at any time during a meeting. Please note that public comment should be on topics related to the work of the State Board's constitutional and statutory authority. Those wishing to speak must be signed in at the table outside of the meeting. Persons speaking to the board during public comment should state their name at the beginning of the allotted time. Anyone refusing to be identified will be prohibited from speaking. Each person may address the board for up to 5 minutes. A majority of members present and voting may take action to reduce or extend the amount of individual time allotted to all the speakers. If at any time persons appearing before the board exceed the time limitations set forth in this policy or on the agenda or become abusive or threatening in language or behavior, it shall be the responsibility of the president to determine what is out of order. The president may refuse permission to continue to address the board. So it looks like we have 2 public comment cards that are submitted. I'm going to ask Board Member Penner to announce those. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 2. Up first is Christine Hafner. I'm pronouncing that correctly, and Dana Fontaine. So first is Christine. Thank you.
Very good. My name is Dr. Christine Hefner. I'm the president of the Nebraska School Library Association, and I'm represented on this board by Mr. Kirk Penner. As a school librarian for over 20 years, I can't count the number of times that I've looked towards neighboring states like Iowa and said to myself, thank God I live in Nebraska. Thank God I live in a state that cares enough about its kids to make sure every student has access to a high-quality school library program where they can grow as lifelong readers and lifelong learners. Last Monday, I met with the coordinator of libraries for Des Moines Public Schools in Des Moines, Iowa, a district of around 31,000 students. Their district serves 38 elementary schools, 11 middle schools, and 5 high schools. They currently employ 2 school librarians for the entire district. In Des Moines Public Schools, the high school and middle school libraries are used for staff meetings and study halls. They are not open to schools or to students during the day. No new materials have been purchased for their middle schools or high schools in the last 7 years. According to the Des Moines Register, over 450 titles were pulled from the school libraries at the start of this last school year, including classics and Holocaust memoirs. This is typical across school districts in Iowa, which again is why I am so thankful every day that Nebraska is not Iowa. I am so proud that Nebraskans have a long history in recognizing the key role that literacy and access to libraries play in the overall education of our students. I'm proud that Nebraskans value the power of literature and reliable information, and that we make sure every student has access to a school library that is current and up to date, and that reflects the needs of the community that that library serves. Rule 10, as it stands, upholds these values and beliefs. And I am really proud that our Nebraska Board of Education has protected and prioritized student access to good library programs through Rule 10. The changes that Mr. Penner is proposing to Rule 10 diminish Nebraska's investment in school libraries and in Nebraska's kids. Among these changes, there would be no requirement for schools to update or maintain their school libraries with new books or resources. The current rule requires that each library purchase up to 150 new books per year, which is not an overwhelming investment, and it ensures that a school library can make necessary updates and replacements of worn-out materials. Without this infusion of new books, a library collection will quickly become worn out and outdated. On average, this is an investment of less than $2,000 per year for a school library that serves the entire community. The proposed changes to Rule 10 have an unbalanced focus on pornography and sexually explicit content, and neither LB 281463.02 or the Federal Children's Internet Protection Act warrant these changes. LB 281463.02 encompasses the act of creating child pornography, which is not in question in our school libraries. SIPA already federally mandates filters to prevent access to obscene images or content over the internet, which again does not extend to our school library collections. Certified school librarians work very hard to select appropriate content for the communities they serve. And examples of sexually explicit content in school libraries are rare. There are already processes in place at the local level to challenge and remove titles deemed inappropriate. By removing the provisions that ensure every student has access to a high-functioning school library, we are abandoning our students to whatever ideas and information they can find on the internet, and degrading the quality of our Nebraska schools. Rule 10, as it stands, provides the foundation for strong library programs in every district across our state. Nebraska kids are served well by Rule 10 as it stands, and the proposed changes do not make our schools or our school libraries better for our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Dana Fontaine.
Good morning. I am Dana Fontaine, a librarian media specialist. I am also an advocate for all libraries and classrooms. I am a proponent of education and am very concerned about the proposed changes for Rule 10. Not only are the proposed changes vague, but they are very harmful and detrimental to Nebraska schools. The first question I pose to the board is, why attack libraries when students have the internet in their pockets? 006.01 states, quality indicator. The Library Media Technology Program provides a wide range of accessible print and electronic resources that expand opportunity for learning, contribute to information literacy, support the local curriculum, and enhance and enrich learning experiences for all students. With your proposed changes based on sexuality, the curriculum in this statement will not be able to be taught. Any of William Shakespeare's plays will not be able to be taught. Hardly any mythology will be able to be taught. Even the classics, such as The Scarlet Letter, which is solely based around sexuality or sexual acts. My second questions are, what is considered an average person? Building off of this, what makes a reasonable person? This section proposed changes state that emphasis is placed on the development of skills necessary for independent lifelong learning. The key word here being independent. Do we really want to get rid of independent thinking? Students will read what they need. If they do not understand something, they will go seek it out, whether it's in a school library or on the internet. As a school library, it is our responsibility to provide answers for those questions. We obviously can't control the questions being asked, but we can provide the answers to those questions. It is our responsibility to provide quality answers instead of the misinformation on the internet. It will be dangerous if we start censoring books based on sexuality or any information that makes us uncomfortable. Even the Bible, located in the as according to the Dewey Decimal System, 220H72, has passages. Ezekiel 16:17, Deuteronomy 25:11-12, and Genesis 19:8 has numerous sexual passages between its pages. The third question I pose to the board is, when was the last time that you were in a library? The proposed changes also state schools shall provide an effective library media technology program through the employment of qualified staff and the acquisition of library media technology materials sufficient to meet the instructional needs of the staff and students. Certified librarians are the most qualified staff for the position. What is going to label the staff as qualified? For example, I have 2 master's degrees and present at conferences. Do you want to fire all free-thinking librarians and fill the positions with lesser qualified staff? I also have concerns with the penalties and issue of compliance. This leads to my 4th question. Who is going to police this? The superintendents of Class A schools have thousands of students and staff to worry about, and rely and trust on professional librarians to help them out with judging whether a book is right for their collection. We as librarians have the objectivity needed to determine what is appropriate, not only for the age group in which we teach, but for the interests of our students and staff. I can assure you that librarians have the best interests of children in mind. My final question is, what was the catalyst that caused these proposed changes? Will this be made public? These proposals seem cherry-picked to fit an unwelcoming agenda. Rule 10 does not need to be gutted. In my district, Rule 10 levels the playing field. Rule 10 is amended with these if Rule 10 is amended with these changes, then your lower income students might not get as many materials as the more affluent schools. A school with 100 kids will be at a disadvantage to the larger schools because there is no longer a minimum number of books that are going to be purchased. Districts can take that money and use it for other purposes. Do you have any questions for me as a practicing school librarian? And I also welcome you into my library, our library, at any time.
Thank you.
Okay, in addition to the public testimony we've heard, we've also received 7 written public comments that have been submitted. Let's see. And those can be found in the electronic meeting agenda for the board and the public to review. All right, we are going to move to agenda item 6 to approve the consent agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda? Patsy?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. All right, it is moved and seconded to adopt the consent agenda. Per board policy, there is no discussion on the motion to adopt the consent agenda. Would the recording secretary please call the roll?
Penner,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Fricky,
Yes.
Neary,
Yes.
Goebbels,
Yes.
Morrison, Tegmeyer, Kojans,
Yes.
7 yes, 1 absent.
Okay. The affirmative has it, and the consent agenda is adopted with 7 yes and 1 absent. All right, we are on agenda item 7, standing committee reports. The next item of business are the reports of the standing committee. I will report on behalf of the executive committee meeting. I'm going to need my glasses for this one. All right. The executive committee reports that on February 1st, that we have had weekly meetings that were held since the January board meeting. Members present were myself, Elizabeth Techmeyer, Jacqueline Morrison, and Kirk Penner. The committee reviewed the NDE, at our last meeting, the committee reviewed the NDE deficit request issue listing with the governor's recommendations in preparation for NDE's hearing before the legislators' appropriation committee next Tuesday. The committee then reviewed the commissioner's recommendations on bills scheduled for hearings next week. The committee also discussed positions on LR 278CA, the constitutional amendment to change the membership of the State Board of Education. The committee decided to continue the discussion with the board in the work schedule that was yesterday afternoon. The committee recommends that the board adopt the legislative positions as recommended by the executive committee, except for LB 1052. Committee member Deborah Neary requested a separate consideration of the board's position on LB 1052, and it will be taken up under a separate motion. Before adjourning, the committee discussed plans for the work session that we had yesterday afternoon that was very successful. This concludes the executive committee report. Any questions or discussion? Okay. Is there a motion on item 7.1A?
Yes.
Okay.
I move to adopt the legislative positions as recommended by the executive committee with the exception of LB 1052.
Second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, it is moved and seconded to adopt the legislative positions as recommended by the executive committee with the exception of LB, this says 102, but 1052. Okay, is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, the motion is to adopt the legislative positions as recommended by the executive committee with the exception of LB 1052. Would the recording secretary please call the roll?
Morrison? Yes. Tegmeyer? Kojons?
Yes.
Neary?
Yes.
Fricky?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Penner?
Yes.
Goebbels?
Yes.
7 yes, 1 absent.
Okay, the affirmative has it, and the motion to adopt the legislative positions as recommended by the executive committee, with the exception of LB 1052, is adopted with 7 yes and 1 absent. All right, we are on agenda item 7.1B, and this is an action item I requested, but because I'm presiding today, Board Member Morrison has agreed to make this motion.
I have the motion as prepared, however, I think I want to change a word, so bear with me. I will, the motion, just so that everyone's aware, the motion currently reads, I move that the State Board of Education support LB 1052 and direct the commissioner to immediately send an email and letter of support to members of the legislature's education committee communicating the change in the NDE's position from neutral to proponent. I believe that rather than the motion being that the State Board of Education support LB 1052, we would be moving that the State Board of Education become a proponent of LB 1052 and direct the commissioner to immediately send an email and letter of support to members of the legislature's education committee communicating the change in the NDE's position from neutral to proponent. So that is what I would like to change on the written motion rather than use the word support. We are consistent with our other language that we would be a proponent for the bill. And so with that, I move.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Lisa. All right. It is moved and seconded that the Board of Education becomes a proponent. Thank you. Should always talk to the lawyer first. Of LB 1052 and direct the commissioner to immediately send an email and letter to support two members of the legislature's education committee communicating the change in the NDE's position from neutral to proponent. Is there any discussion? Did you want?
I do, unless someone wants to go first. Otherwise, I'll share. Yes. Okay, my heart and my brain are not on the same page. My heart says yes. Teachers would so appreciate this. It would boost morale, and it is true. Many do spend dollars out of their own pockets, and I can attest to this. My first year of being an elementary school counselor, I spent $800 of my own personal money. Second year was $500, and then my third year of being an elementary school counselor, I spent $300. These purchases made my job better for me and my students and easier, but it was my choice to make those purchases. Now for my brain. My brain says it's too much to ask of our taxpayers. Personally speaking, the taxpayer paid my salary for 35 years and contributed to my retirement, for which I'm most grateful. The fiscal note on this bill is between $5 and $8 million. That is a significant price tag. Can we perhaps find other ways to provide teachers with money to pay for out-of-pocket purchases? Maybe PTOs or PTAs could give their teachers money. Personally, when I was teaching at elementary school, our PTO gave each of us a $50 bill, a crisp $50 bill, which we really appreciated. Perhaps community businesses could adopt a school, or communities could hold a chili cook-off where the proceeds would be divided amongst the teachers for this purpose. I support the idea of assisting teachers with out-of-pocket expenses, but not at this price tag and at the expense of taxpayers. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sherry. Anybody else? Patty?
Sherry, I agree with you that I think we all are very supportive of teachers and want to support them in whatever ways we can. But when I look at this, my perspective is that local schools have the opportunity to find ways to support their teachers. And for that, I can't support being a proponent of this bill.
No. Jacqueline?
I appreciate the conversation here, and I think a part of this is where I was going yesterday. We took a position on a $45 million bill for school safety related expenses. And we didn't say, I think local school districts should figure it out themselves. We said if this is a need in the classroom or if this is a need for schools, then we would support it. We didn't say that's too much of a burden on the taxpayer to ask them to support safety for kids. And so at that time, when I said we need to have a strategy as a board on what we're taking positions on or asking school districts where their needs so that we can be consistent with where their needs are, because it puts us, in my opinion, in a position where how can we say yes yesterday to one request that the legislature has for providing additional funding for schools, which is outside of the TIOSA formula, and saying no to this one, which is also additional funding for schools in a different kind of way. I am supportive of this because we were supportive of the one yesterday. I don't see them as fundamentally different, and as I heard the CTE presentation today, yesterday I was like, there have to be other things that schools need, whether that is updating their IT systems or something else. It seems like he was working with equipment from the 1940s until he got this particular grant. And so there's probably other school districts out there that are working with antiquated equipment, but do they make it work? Yes. Are schools resourceful? Are teachers resourceful? Absolutely they are, but that doesn't mean that we have to continue to ask them to be as resourceful as possible. I know that every school PTA or PTO is not the same, and it goes back to an equity issue for me. I've been at a school, my kids attended a school where we were asked to pass the hat, and within 2 days they raised $100,000. I've been at another school where the pass the hat was a $15,000 PTO budget for the entire school year. And so to say that a teacher's ability to purchase supplies for their students is governed by the amount of money that the PTO can raise and that the parents are able to put into a pool, that presents an equity issue for me. The other thing I would say about this particular bill, I think I just lost my train of thought, but I'll stop there. So for those reasons, I'm inclined to support this. Whether or not it passes is a different story. But if we're going to, I think we have to be consistent in what we do. I think that's a place where Kirk Penner and I we agree. Not saying he agrees on this, but I think we both agree on consistency, and that's one thing that I'm always asking for from this board, is that we be consistent in our actions. And I think this is inconsistent with some of the other actions that we've taken if we say no.
Patsy?
Well, having been a teacher for 42 years, I always try and step back and think about this from the teacher's point of view. I have to tell you, I agree with everything that you said about consistency. But our goal, our number one goal as a Board of Education this year was to increase the number of teachers that are attracted to Nebraska to teach. And we are, as far as I can see, I read someplace the other day, we were 700 teachers short to start the school year, and now we're 900 teachers short to start to keep teaching this year. And so I think one of our goals should be to make teaching more and more attractive to students in Nebraska and to school systems in Nebraska. I don't think that we should give up anything that's not right or too much or anything like that. But teachers are facing the same problems that our constituents are facing in this economic climate that we're living in. And frankly, when I went to buy things for my classroom, I was the sole earner of money in my house as a single parent. And so I know it was a struggle then to do that, but I did it. And so I think this bill speaks to a lot of issues that say we support you, we want you to have the things that you need in your classroom, we're willing to help you do that a little more because we can, and it seems so simple to me. I know it's a lot of money, but our teachers are worth a lot of money, and we need more of them.
I remembered my second point. Whenever I do my income taxes every year, the federal government asks me, are you a teacher who has spent money in your classroom? And I no. But I believe that there's a federal tax deduction for teachers who receive something like this. So in my opinion, the federal government has already made a decision that the taxpayers, all of us collectively, can take, basically, we can lose some of that tax revenue to be able to support teachers if what they're doing is using this money to put it back into the classroom. We've decided that already as a society by our federal tax code. And so here, if we're going to do it, I don't see this as any bigger of a burden on the taxpayers of Nebraska. It's the same concept in a different way. In one hand, they're getting a reimbursement. On another, they're getting a reduction on their taxes. But either way, we've already said this is important. And so I don't see this as inconsistent with what we're already doing as a nation.
Anybody else? Okay. I just wanted to make a few comments since I was the one that asked that we consider this. I guess I just, I like to remind people my lens is coming from a district. I have OPS in my district, and I don't have the exact number, but I know we're over 80% free and reduced lunch. And we also have, some high schools in our district that are so large, they're bigger than some other school districts. We have the largest population of refugee youth, of youth who have been in the country less than 5 years, have come from refugee camps, with all sorts of needs, and, plopped into our classrooms. And the teachers are the ones who try to prepare them to be ready for learning. I have so many friends that have told me they've just had to go out and buy coats and mittens and scarves and just basic supplies for a lot of their kids. It's a school district also that doesn't have the funding that other school districts in my state board district have available through their PTA. It just isn't the same at all. And I consider this a huge equity issue, but also just coming back to what we've said as priorities for legislation this year. We believe in the whole body health of every child. We say that we believe in the school environment, and if those are our beliefs, then we can support that by supporting the teachers who make a difference in those areas. And at the same time, we've also said that, and I don't mean to repeat what Patsy said, but that if our education shortage is really our top priority, this is a very small token way to say, we see you teachers, we see the challenges that many of you have, and we want to support that. Some of my teacher friends were like, this is such a small token thing that it wasn't, but to me it is a step in the right direction, that we are acknowledging the challenges that many of our teachers face. And the other thing is, this is for all teachers, parochial, public, et cetera, and we will have an opportunity at NDE and SBOE to say what are the criteria that have to be met in order to ensure that this money isn't being wasted. And so I do feel like it is an important step, and so I did want us each to vote on it. So any other comments?
Madam President?
Yes, Lisa?
Several of us have been on panels at conferences and listened to teachers, conferences in the summer throughout the year. And one of the things that we've heard often is we would like the public to do more supporting of what we do in the classroom. What we're seeing in the media, what we're hearing is negativity. And the narrative needs to change. Whether this passes or not, we're sending a message out there that we care about the teachers in the classroom who are taking care of the students that need an education to be successful in a career or college. So that's why I'm going to support this, sending the positive message that you make a difference every day that you're in the classroom with these kids with needs of all kinds. Thank you.
Patsy?
Okay, all right. I just want to make one other statement. I assure you that this is a symbolic gift to them, and that the teachers that would go out and spend this money will not stop doing things for their kids if they can do it financially. So it's symbolic, and democracy is based on universal caring about the good of all. And I just think this is a sign that we care. We want you to know that.
I'll make an additional. I just believe there are other factors that have a greater influence on teachers staying in the profession than this, I guess. From what I hear, teachers want supportive administrators and parents, and they want improved student behavior. So that's just what I'm hearing when I go out.
All right, the motion, anybody else? Okay, the motion is that the State Board of Education support LB 1052, or no, that we are a proponent of LB 1052 and direct Commissioner to immediately send an email and letter to support to members of the Legislature's Education Committee, communicating the change in our position from neutral to proponent. Would the recording secretary please call the roll?
Neary,
Yes.
Goebbels,
No.
Morrison. Yes. Kojons,
Yes.
Fricky,
Yes.
Penner.
No.
Tegmeyer, Jones.
No.
4 yes, 3 noes, 1 absent.
That's okay. The affirmative has it, and the motion that the State Board of Education support LB 1052 and direct the Commissioner to immediately send an email and letter of support to members of the Legislature's Education Committee, communicating the change in our position from neutral to proponent is adopted. Let's see. Pardon me? Okay. I guess we are, what time is it? How are we? We're good. We're now on agenda item 7.2, Budget and Finance Committee. Chair Patsy Kojons will report on behalf of the Budget and Finance Committee meeting.
The Budget and Finance Committee reports that at its Thursday, February 1st meeting, members present were Patsy Kojons, Patty Goebbels, Lisa Fricky, and Sherry Jones. Our committee reviewed 4 action items supporting all 4 for full board consideration. The first item reviewed was a contract for the Nebraska Early Childhood Data System. The potential contract with DHHS will allow for continued improvement and information related to early childhood provider options available throughout our state. The second item reviewed was the request to authorize the commissioner to enter into contracts for replacement of the portal, a data collection system used in conjunction with schools and several other data systems, including a comprehensive needs assessment system, finance data improvement project, P-card tracking and reconciling system, and SharePoint modernization projects. Just a side comment on that, that portal has been used for over 20 years, and we're all using technology that becomes obsolete in 2 years. The third action item was also for contracts related to technology updates. These potential contracts are for systems used for collecting data, including the Consolidated Data Collection System, which is outdated, soon to be unsupported, and inefficient compared to our newer technology. This item also includes project management as well as procurement and application development in this request. The last action item reviewed was for contracts to provide technical support for the new systems, along with application-specific and regulatory compliance training. This request is designed to make sure that the new systems can be used efficiently and effectively after the funds to develop these systems are gone. Additionally, our committee reviewed 3 upcoming action items, including an update on ESSER funds and upcoming contracts and amendments that will be coming in the next couple of board meetings. The other 2 items the committee was briefed on was for early childhood classroom vignettes to be used in coaching training and program improvements, a possible contract renewal with the National Association of Elementary School Principals for 30% PK, 3rd grade leadership academy. Last, the committee reviewed the monthly board travel expenses, noting no concerns in this area. This concludes the Budget and Finance Committee report. Patsy Kojons, Chair.
Thank you, Patsy. Are there any questions on the reports in item 7.2A? Okay. Is there a motion on item 7.2B?
Yes, there is. I move to authorize the commissioner to contract for the Nebraska Early Childhood Data System, ECIDS.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. It is moved and seconded to authorize the commissioner to contract with for the Nebraska Early Childhood Data System, also called ECIDS. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay. Oh, Patsy.
One thing that I don't think was said in my report is that all of this equipment will also. One thing that was missed in the report, and I think is important for us to understand, is all of these requests will also decrease man hours of work. And so that will help, because as I listen to the people that were talking to us, and I'm sure everyone that's on the committee will agree, that they're doing Herculean efforts to get everything done with what they have. But when something is 20 years old, they need some help.
Thank you, Patsy. Patty?
Really, the essence, as I see this with this particular item, is that we need to improve this system for early childhood data, because as Melody shared with us yesterday, it's impossible to get unduplicated numbers, which means that any data that you're trying to pull from that may not be valid data. And we need to be sure that we have systems working together so that the early childhood, I mean, there are tons of data points related to ECE, and we need to make sure that those are as accurate and valid as possible.
Okay. Thank you, Patty. Patsy?
One thing that I think is also evident, Patty, in this, as we look at it, is that as they bring it up to date, we need to continue to be caregivers over that and make sure that we are updating materials, technology as it's needed, so that we don't end up going another 20 years before, and it's an emergency, before we look at it.
Thank you, Patsy. Anybody else? All right. It is, let's see. The motion is to authorize the commissioner to contract for the Nebraska Early Childhood Data System. Would the recording secretary please call the roll?
Morrison?
Yes.
Fricke?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Goebbels?
Yes.
Kojons?
Yes.
Neary?
Yes.
Tegmeyer? Penner?
Yes.
7 yes, 1 absent.
All right. The affirmative has it, and the motion to authorize the commissioner to contract for the Nebraska Early Childhood Data System is adopted. We are now on 7.2C. Is there a motion on item 7.2C?
Yes, I have that motion. I move to authorize the commissioner to enter into contracts for the NDE portal replacement and other associated projects.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay. Yeah, that was a question, not a statement. Thank you for understanding what I. It is moved and seconded to authorize the commissioner to enter into contracts for the NDE portal replacement and other associated projects. Is there any discussion? Patty?
Yeah, in addition to the information that Patsy shared, this is about efficiency, not only for internal efficiency, but also for all of the school districts that have to enter a portal to put in data that we need to have. And I think it's critically important when you're working with a system that's 20 years old, even in how you access that portal, is obsolete. And it's more than time to update this portal.
Lisa?
If I understood what member Google said, it made me think of, as it is now, a teacher has access to this portal and then has to go in and deactivate it if they leave, which is a big project. This would automatically tie in with when they are released or not teaching in that district. That automatically goes away for that particular teacher. So again, the efficiency.
Patsy?
I'll keep this really short, but it'll make sense to all the board members. Customer service.
Thanks. Jacqueline?
I think everybody here knows I have never been a fan of this project, and I'm still not. I don't think we ever should have given ESSER money to this project. And to Patsy's point, we need to have a plan to continuously update our technology annually. And the fact that we're 20 years behind probably means we didn't. And when this proposal was brought to us, it was not brought to us with, for what I remember, a plan of how we're going to continue or find funds, or where we've identified funds for the next 10 years to keep this up to date. And so to take once-in-a-lifetime funds that were for kids to update our systems that we didn't plan for, that we didn't ask the legislature to contribute to, maybe we did and they didn't give it to us, and maybe we didn't push. I think it's wrong. But anyways, that's just my intro. My actual question is, it says on, I read this one and I also read 7.2.d. And typically when we get these documents before us, we are approving a contract with a vendor. And here, I'm not seeing that this is actually us approving a contract with a vendor. It outlines that these will be new contracts and that there will be a procurement process and that they will work with the OCIO to go through that procurement. Seems like there's also some type of relationship or procurement of services. Not yet, Deborah, because I'm not sure that's who I want to talk to. Saying that we are, so then it's saying that we will be contracting with the OCIO, which is our internal, the state of Nebraska's internal kind of technology group. So I understand that, but what I think, I guess what I would like to ask the committee first is, are you just asking, or were you asked for us to just give permission for them to enter into whichever contracts that they want and see fit? And then if it so happens that one of them is less or one of them is more, then the commissioner can move money around as he sees fit to make sure that we spend this money, and then it doesn't ever come back to us? Is this just a pre-authorization for an expenditure of funds? And did you guys discuss that in your committee and say, we're okay with that?
Patsy?
Well, I'd like to call our lead person from the computer department, from technology up, or somebody who can speak to this with more expertise. This technology is not something that I spend a lot of time with if I don't have to. But, well, Kristen, I did not see any plan yet But I can't imagine, knowing the people that are working in that committee, that they won't do due diligence to do it and bring back materials to us and make sure we're doing the right thing.
With all due respect, Patsy, my question isn't about technology at all.
No, I know it's not.
And so my question is about when this committee is bringing this to the full board, I assume asking us for our approval with your recommendation.
Correct.
Can somebody from the committee tell me what you're recommending that we do? Because unlike the other contracts that usually come to us or things that come to us in this form, we're saying, yes, I agree that you can contract with A for consulting for the amount of X. This just says, here's how we're going to spend the money. Here's how we're going to go through the procurement process. And then it also says, and if we need to, we'll move some money around in different buckets. I don't know what the exact line is, but it talks about the commissioner being able to do it. And so what are you guys recommending to us that we're giving authorization for? What was the committee's understanding?
We're beginning the search. And Kristen, do you want to go ahead and explain more of that?
Sure. So for this particular item, I believe that there will be one RFP, which is in process for the portal replacement, because that is the biggest project. Generally speaking, when we have done smaller projects, we contract with the OCIO, either the office itself or the labor procurement system that they run, called Covendus. That does not require contracting with the OCIO because they're a state agency, or with Covendus does not require a full RFP procedure because they are a state agency. With regard to the question you had about the commissioner's ability to sort of move things around, we have identified the major projects that we intend to do up to the dollar amount that we intend to do it. An RFP for the portal, Covendus for the other projects. We are at this point 6 months till the end of ESSER. These things are necessarily estimates in terms of what these things will cost. If we get an RFP back from a successful bidder that's $1 million, $1,200,000. I would like the commissioner to be able to have the ability to approve that contract. Essentially what it is a savings clause due to the lack of time that we have for the remainder of these projects. And I think sort of the context that this was talked about in committee yesterday, and I think you'll probably hear more about next month. Lane also has a list of projects, potential projects for what we anticipate will be an underspend, a net underspend for things that we plan for ESSER.
So are you asking that we delegate our authority to generally approve each individual contract that's over a certain amount to the commissioner?
Yes.
And this one is in the amount of $2.5 million, and the second one is in the amount of, let me get to it. If I'm looking at it right. Well, it's not on the first page. Let me go to the next one. Give me just a second. I'm sorry, board. I should have this number in front of me. I think it's even larger than 2.5 million.
It's $3 million.
3 million.
Altogether.
So if the board today approves these two items, the commissioner then has the authority to enter into $5 million worth of contracts without ever having to bring any of those contracts back to this board?
Yeah, I think that's accurate in that regard. I will say that that is not, like with respect to contracting with Covendus, throughout the lifetime of ESSER, we have authorized the commissioner to enter into contracts with whomever to complete the work of specific projects. I don't see this as being any different.
I don't know what you mean when you say we.
The board, in past agenda items, has given the commissioner authority to enter into project-based contracts with regard to IT development and services, the majority of which are through OCIO.
But at this moment, we don't even know if this would be, so all of this would go through OCIO.
The contract for portable replacement will be an RFP, which is already in process. We don't know the successful bidder yet because we're not far enough into the process. Generally speaking, what we do when we require additional technical expertise in order to complete smaller projects is we contract with OCIO through Covendus to add extra staff for projects.
So why did the RFP process not occur beforehand and the contract with whoever we are seeking to award be brought to this board? Why wasn't that planned so that the board could follow its traditional way of reviewing contracts and approving them?
I think at this point it's down to the limited amount of time we have to do some of these things. The RFP process has been started. We have approved in past meetings other contracts where the RFP process has been kicked off. There's sort of an inherent awkwardness in issuing an RFP when there's not board approval. I also don't want to wait too long to get started on an RFP. So we've tried to sort of strike that middle ground balance to make sure that all of this can be done by September 30th.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any more questions for staff. No.
Okay, I'll just talk loud. Just to add on, we hear that a lot, that it's a time issue. Thank you. We just hear it a lot that it's a time issue. On my 2 years on the board, it's nonstop. And so, again, Jacqueline is very consistent on this, but it's something we need to maybe plan a little bit better for because time is always an issue with NDE. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Patty?
I would just like to back up a little bit and explain that in committee, Kristen provided the committee with a very detailed strategic plan outlining all of the projects, the need for contract employment as opposed to RFPs. I mean, I just got this yesterday, so I haven't had time to read through it in as much detail as I want, but it's a very thoughtful strategic plan, and I'm sure that you've spent considerable amount of time putting together the plan.
Yeah.
Also, it's really important to understand that part of the result of some of these projects is to be able to continue updating the system so that we're never in the position again that we have a portal that is 20 years old and really can't be updated anymore. So that is part of that plan, and that was part of the discussion in our committee yesterday, that there's built-in training, there are built-in strategies to be using that will allow for continued updating of the portal as well as some of the other application projects.
I think all of you should have received also a copy of that strategic plan attached to each of these items.
Jacqueline?
I just want to note for a second the irony. When we were working on our bylaws, there was a $50,000 limit, and staff had asked, or I shouldn't say they asked, let's say suggested or hinted at, that number may need to be revisited because the cost of goods, cost of services, things have gone up, and so that $50,000 threshold may not be the right number. And we came back with a proposal to this board for, I think it was $75,000. And they said, no, we're not comfortable giving up that amount of authority. We'd rather keep it at 50. And the committee that was working on that said, that's fine, not a problem. We can keep it at 50 if that's the level at which the board is not comfortable giving up authority after that 50,000. Anything under that 50,000 threshold, we're comfortable. Anything above that, we want to see what we're spending our money on. So the fact that we can be brought a proposal for recommendation for a total of $5 million, and we say, okay, that's fine, time crunch, technology, it's hard, go ahead. We'll give up our authority for way more than a $25,000 threshold. We're talking about $5 million. And time is of the essence. That's always what we hear from the department when they want to do something that doesn't follow this board's policies. Time is of the essence. I think it's unacceptable. I don't think it's an excuse. And I think if we're going to stick to what we believe, and $50,000 was the number that we decided on not even 60 days ago, not even maybe a little over 30 days ago, it just seems very contradictory to me that we would recommend this. And I'm not going to say it's usurping our processes, but it is a loophole to get around our processes that we're being asked for. So I'm not supporting this, and it's not because of my fundamental disagreement with spending these ESSER funds on this project. It's because, to me, it's disrespectful to the board to keep putting us back in this position and asking us to pass these things because the department didn't plan properly. And maybe it's a staffing issue. Seems like one of the ways that we're dealing with the staffing issue is going to be to utilize OCIO's help. But we've been talking about these things since 2020. So this is 4 years of planning that could have happened ahead of time. So I don't buy that we ran out of time. I think this is just a way for the department to do what they want to do without having to bring it to the board. And so I don't agree. I'm surprised that the committee, who I believe some of the people on the committee may have not have been comfortable with the $100,000 threshold, is bringing this to us and asking for approval. So that's the end of my rant, but I'm surprised that we're okay with this. This is not about technology. This isn't about understanding the complexity of a system. This isn't us trying to figure out inputs, outputs, portals. This isn't about us crunching numbers. This is a philosophical question about, are we going to authorize the commissioner to enter into contracts outside of bringing them to us? And it seems like that committee said, yes, we're comfortable with it in the amount of $5 million.
Patsy?
Kristen, will you be able to do everything that needs to be done with the time limit of using the ESSER plan or the ESSER money funds for that? Is it possible for you to complete this in the time that you have left?
The activities that have been proposed in the 3 items for today,
Uh-huh.
yeah, I believe it is.
So you could get it done.
We intend to get it done.
Yeah, you
yes.
intend to get it done.
I
So
don't-
if we approved it next month, because I see the point here about breaking rules and all that sort of thing. I get that. But I also see the point of the good for our constituency, our staff, the whole state. So my question is, if you can get it done before we lose that money, before we no longer have this opportunity in history, and you say yes, right?
I say yes as of today. I don't know that, so we have 6 months left. So we would be talking about pushing this off for another month. That leaves 5 months. And there is a lot of work proposed here. I do have concerns about the ability to get all of this done the shorter the time gets. We are running down to the end of the clock. I understand the point that Ms. Morrison is trying to make.
I'm not trying to make the point. I am making a point.
I think you answered Patsy's question.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay. The motion is to authorize the commissioner to enter into contracts for the NDE portal replacement and other associated projects. Would the recording secretary please call the roll?
Tegmeyer? Neary?
Yes.
Morrison?
No.
Kojons?
Yes.
Penner?
No.
Goebbels?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Fricke?
Yes.
5 yes, 2 noes, 1 absent.
The affirmative has it, and the motion to authorize the commissioner to enter into contracts for the NDE portal replacement and other associated projects is adopted. Is there a motion on item 7.2D?
I have that motion. I move to authorize the commissioner to enter into new contracts to meet project management, procurement, and application development needs.
I just want to say you didn't read that with very much sincerity. I'm kidding. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. It is moved and seconded to authorize the commissioner to enter into new contracts to meet project management, procurement, and application development needs. Is there any discussion on the motion?
I have a question.
Okay.
I noticed some body language occurring in the past interaction that was occurring about whether or not we are actually delegating this authority or not, and I think that was Ryan kind of having some trepidation. So if I'm wrong or I'm not saying the right things, I'd like to know what's help me understand what's not happening or what is happening. Mm-hmm.
Ryan, are you referring to my reaction when I heard another board member say break the rules?
Correct.
Yeah, I hadn't heard you say break the rules, rather loophole. So when I heard break the rules, that caused a reaction in me because the board can decide what it wants to do as it just did with the last motion, right? So I would reinforce the point that I think I heard from staff earlier in that there have been many motions or items that have been brought before the board that authorize the commissioner to contract with vendors yet to be named or unnamed vendors. So the notion of that is not a new precedent.
Okay. Thanks, Ryan.
Any other discussion? All right, the motion is to authorize the commissioner to enter into new contracts to meet project management, procurement, and application development needs. Would the recording secretary please call the roll?
Goebbels,
Yes.
Neary. Yes. Kojons,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Fricky,
Yes.
Tegmeyer, Penner,
No.
Morrison. No. 5 yes, 2 no, 1 absent.
All right, the votes are 5 yes, 2 no's. The affirmative has it, and the motion to authorize the commissioner to enter into new contracts and to meet project management, procurement, and application development needs is adopted. Is there a motion on item 7.2E?
Yes, Madam President. I move to authorize the commissioner to enter into contracts for NDE to provide technical, application-specific, and regulatory compliance training sessions and materials.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. It is moved and seconded to authorize the commissioner to enter into contracts for NDE to provide technical application, specific, and regulatory compliance training sessions and materials. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Madam President, I would just, it's my understanding that this is to accompany what we just passed, and that the training is appropriate to make sure that people understand what the capabilities of what we just passed can do and how they appropriately take that information and use it in their area. So it's almost like a marriage that this needs to be passed, because training is key to success in so many areas of anything.
Okay, Patty?
And I would add to that, and I'm sorry, I don't remember if this was for D or E, but cybersecurity in schools has become a critical issue, and some of the training talked about is cybersecurity training that would be provided to school districts through the ESUs or just to individual districts. So I think that's really a great service for us to be providing.
Okay, Lisa?
I understand the comments and concerns of the board members with the last 3 or 4 issues that came before us. But now that it's passed, if we want to complete and make that transition successful, we need this. So it's done properly, and safety concerns with technology, I mean, it's really a piece that's needed to go with what we just passed.
Jacqueline?
Just curious, I found the line, with federal deadlines for completion of ESSER spending on September 30th, 2024, the commissioner may reallocate resources among specifically enumerated projects above, as well as approve additional modernization and data improvement projects of like kind of benefit to of the Department of Education school district in Nebraska school districts. And so is that when we're, I'm just for the people who are approving this, is the commissioner the arbiter or the decider of what's a like kind project that he wants to then enter into, or is that for the board to decide if it's like kind, or it's completely within his discretion? I'm just curious how you guys, my other board members who have approved these, are interpreting that line.
Lisa?
That line again for me, please, the last part, the part about like kind. Thank you.
The commissioner may reallocate resources among specifically enumerated projects above, as well as approve additional modernization and data improvement projects of like kind of benefit to, I think it means the Department of Education and Nebraska school districts. So if the commissioner decided there was another like kind project that was, I guess, of benefit to a Nebraska school district, then are we saying he could appropriate all of this money there without coming back to the board?
Did you want to say? No. As I had you reread it, like kind in coordination with what we just passed is how I took that, not something out there. I thought it all fit together in this one cybersecurity, revising things that are antiquated. I was thinking that could possibly, something might come up in doing this, that they need another component to make it work. I am not techie, so I don't know what it might be, and I understand that it's the idea that he might do something somewhere else. I'm likening it to what we just passed and hopefully what we will pass just now. Does that make sense? Okay.
I give myself permission. I love that you bring up these discussion items, and they're crucial. And I think everybody in the room has heard you, as we have in the past. Like, this is not new, and I believe that there is improvement that we've seen, because this has been, you know, a discussion for years. You know, I guess sometimes I just, because I worked for a board for so long, you know, I just found myself in between a rock and a hard place where I had a grant and, you know, I was doing my best to, you know, meet the goals, but, you know, also be transparent and accountable and let my boards weigh in. And, you know, sometimes we do, staff are just in between a rock and a hard place. And I want to believe, because I have faith in Kristen and Dr. Maher, that we are at one of those places. And if Kristen keeps doing this, then, you know what I mean, then we'll have, in my opinion, then I'll have reason for concern. But I want us to get the best possible RFP and product and give them some nimbleness. Now, we are, you know, Dr. Maher can interpret this to a wider authority, and if he does go on a huge spending spree, like, we have an opportunity to respond to that. I guess I just have faith that Dr. Maher's not going to interpret this in a broader way than what we're just talking about right here and now. And but I also want to go back to, I think what you're saying is really important. I believe that, you know, this is a tough one for board members, because we do, I mean, what you're saying is important, but we also want to make sure that we spend these dollars successfully for the good, you know, the greater good. And so we just hope, I hope we aren't in this kind of situation too many times. Now, would anybody, Patsy?
I appreciate, Jacqueline, your ability to go through things and to find the loopholes and all of that. I really do. And I think it's really important for our board that we have someone like you that can do that. I'm sorry that I made a mistaken word choice, and I think that happens to all of us in life. But I agree that what you're saying, in the best possible worlds, would not have happened. However, just so you know that my motivation was that we don't have, we're understaffed, and I think the committee would agree with that. If you ask them, are understaffed for doing what they have to do in the technology committee, and they have really worked hard to plan all of this and do all of this. And so I felt bad about even asking, can you accomplish this in that short of time? Anyway, Thank you for being our guardian against ourselves.
I'm not asking any board member to defend their position. We are all independent thinkers and can vote however we want. I do know that there are certain staff members that when I read something coming from that particular division of the Department of Education, it's thorough, it's coming to the board. We're rarely asked to make exceptions. When you talk about, I have faith in the commissioner, I have faith in the department, there are some that rarely ask us to make exceptions. And when they do, you say, you know what, I'm with you because this isn't a regular practice. I also know, being on the other side as someone who works in government, I have to answer to people too. And every decision that I make, I'm sometimes thinking, if I don't dot my I and cross my T, I am going to be called out on this and I'm going to have someone to answer to. And if the perception of this board, or people's perspective of this board is, it doesn't matter, they're just going to approve it anyway, then nothing's going to change, because no one's being held accountable or actually taking us serious when we say we're not just going to approve something because it's the last minute. I'm not suggesting that we lose out on the opportunity for these dollars, but I am pretty sure this is not the first vote, the second vote, or the third vote we've taken under the auspices that if we don't move fast, something detrimental is going to happen in the next 90 to 180 days. How about we not be put in a position where if it didn't happen, or if we don't take this vote, if we don't make an accommodation, that we're facing doom and gloom in 6 months. As long as we just say, okay, we're facing doom and gloom, we're gonna approve it, we'll continuously be faced and asked for us to do something different because of that. And I just think it's not fair to this board to ask to put us in that position. Not to pick on Patty, but she said, I just got this yesterday. Okay, if you knew something this big was coming, we could have got this 2 weeks ago. We could have got this 3 weeks ago to be able to think about it and discuss it. But, a couple of days before we're asked to vote on this, it's just not fair to the board, and I just think it's a bit disrespectful. So this is not, to my board members, I'm not upset with you, or I don't judge you for however that you're voting. I just think it's a bigger fundamental issue I have, and I would like for things to change.
Anybody else? All right. The motion is to authorize the commissioner to enter into contracts for NDE to provide technical, application-specific, and regulatory/compliance training sessions and materials. Would the recording secretary please call the roll?
Tegmeyer? Neary?
Yes.
Morrison?
No.
Penner?
No.
Goebbels?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Kojons?
Yes.
Fricky?
Yes.
5 yes, 2 noes, 1 absent.
Okay. The votes are 5 yes, 2 noes, 1 absent. The affirmative has it, and the motion to authorize the commissioner to enter into contracts for the NDE to provide technical, application-specific, and regulatory/compliance training sessions and materials is adopted. Agenda item 7.3, the Planning and Evaluation Committee. Chair Sherry Jones will provide a report from the Planning and Evaluation Committee meeting.
Yes, the Planning and Evaluation Committee reports on their committee meeting on February 1st. Members present were Patty Goebbels, Patsy Kojons, Deborah Neary, and myself. The committee reviewed the following 4 items: the authorization to submit the ESSA, which is Every Student Succeeds Act, plan amendment. NDE staff provided an overview of each section and changes made with stakeholder input, as well as a tentative timeline for obtaining feedback from the United States Department of Education. Next item, the authorization to contract with the Northwest Education Association, NWEA, and DRC, Data Recognition Corporation, for statewide assessment services for the 2024-25 school year. the approval of Rule 11 waiver request for Franklin Public Schools, the approval of the computer science and technology standards. The committee recommends the approval of these items. The committee discussed the proposed revisions of position statement S3 on early literacy. Committee members expressed appreciation for updated language. NDE staff will return next month for approval. The committee received an update on the upcoming approval of non-public schools for the 2024-25 school year under Rule 14, Regulations and Procedures for the Legal Operation of Approved Non-Public Schools. NDE staff will return next month for a discussion and approval in May. The committee received an update on the process for a request for information for statewide assessment. NDE staff provided a tentative timeline and process for obtaining stakeholder input. The committee received an update on the science standards revision progress. NDE staff shared a summary of science standards survey number 1. NDE staff answered questions relating to the writing team selection process and timeline. The committee received an update on the mid-year progress report for each priority school, Asante Elementary, Middle, and High School. And I'll just add to the information shared regarding the science standards. Our science standards are under revision. The last standards were revised in 2017, and there will be more opportunity for public input. This concludes the planning and evaluation report.
Thanks, Sherry. Are there any questions for the committee chair? Okay, is there a motion on item 7.3A?
I move to authorize the commissioner to submit Nebraska's revised Every Student Succeeds Act plan.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. It is moved and seconded to authorize the commissioner to submit Nebraska's revised Every Student Succeeds Act plan. Is there a discussion on the motion? Okay. Would the recording, all right, the motion is to authorize the commissioner to submit Nebraska's revised ESSA plan. Would the recording secretary please call the roll?
Kojons,
Yes.
Fricky. Yes. Jones,
Yes.
Tegmeyer, Penner,
Yes.
Neary,
Yes.
Morrison. Yes. Goebbels.
Yes.
7 yes, 1 absent.
All right, the votes are 7 yes, 1 absent. The affirmative has it, and the motion to authorize the commissioner to submit Nebraska's revised ESSA plan is adopted. Agenda item 7.3B. Is there a motion on this item?
I am enthusiastic to make this motion. I move to authorize the commissioner to contract with NWEA for statewide assessment services.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, the motion is to authorize the commissioner to contract with NWEA for statewide assessment services. Would the recording secretary please call the roll?
Penner, Neary,
Yes.
Morrison. Yes. Tegmeyer, Goebbels,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Kojons,
Yes.
Fricky.
Yes.
6 yes, 2 absent.
The votes are 6 yes, 2 absent. The affirmative has it, and the motion to authorize the commissioner to contract with NWA for statewide assessment services is adopted. Agenda item 7.3C, action item, authorize the commissioner to contract with DRC for statewide assessment services. Is there a motion?
Yes, Madam President. I move to authorize the commissioner to contract with DRC for statewide assessment services.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It is moved and seconded to authorize the commissioner to contract with DRC for statewide assessment services. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right. The motion is to authorize the commissioner to contract with DRC for statewide assessment services. Would the recording secretary please call the roll?
Jones,
Yes.
Goebbels,
Yes.
Tegmeyer, Morrison. Yes. Neary,
Yes.
Penner, Fricky,
Yes.
Kojons,
Yes.
6 yes, 2 absent.
The votes are 6 yes, 2 absent. The affirmative has it, and the motion to authorize the commissioner to contract with DRC for statewide assessment services is adopted. Is there a motion on item 7.3D?
Madam President, I move to approve the Rule 11 teacher waiver request for Franklin Public Schools.
Is there a second? It is moved and seconded to approve the Rule 11 teacher waiver request for Franklin Public Schools. Is there any discussion? The motion is to approve the Rule 11 teacher waiver request for Franklin Public Schools. Would the recording secretary please call the roll?
Morrison? Yes. Kojons?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Fricky?
Yes.
Tegmeyer? Googles?
Yes.
Neary?
Yes.
Penner?
Yes.
7 yes, 1 absent.
The votes are 7 yes, 1 absent. The affirmative has it, and the motion to approve the Rule 11 teacher waiver request for Franklin Public Schools is adopted. Is there a motion on item 7.3E?
Yes, Madam President. I move to approve the computer science and technology standards. I move to approve the computer science and technology standards.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. It is moved and seconded to approve the computer science and technology standards. Is there a discussion? The motion is to approve the computer science and technology standards. Would the recording secretary please call the roll?
Jones?
Yes.
Neary?
Yes.
Penner?
Yes.
Googles?
Yes.
Kojons?
Yes.
Tegmeyer? Morrison?
Yes.
Fricky?
Yes.
7 yes, 1 absent.
The votes are 7 yes, 1 absent. The affirmative has it, and the motion to approve the computer science and technology standards is adopted. Board members, let's see, we have, did I skip? Agenda item 7.3F is a discussion item. The revised draft of the proposed revision of the State Board of Education position statement S3 on early literacy. Are there any questions or discussions on this item? Patty?
Yes. This position statement was due to expire, and it also was in need of some upgrading and improving. I appreciate that we have moved this from being an early literacy position statement to one of foundational literacy, because we recognize that certainly the early literacy is the starting point, but literacy and working on literacy continues throughout education. So I'm really pleased that with the revision, some of the statements were updated. I mean, the wording was updated. I also appreciate that the statement itself was reorganized and categorized to be consistent with our multi-tiered systems of support. So I really like that sense of congruency and how we are communicating to the public. So I appreciate the work that has been done to revise the position statement, and we know that we certainly support literacy. That's one of our board priorities.
Patty, Lisa?
I concur with what my fellow board members said. They worked very diligently to get this to be a very good product. I would just like the writer of the final writer with this would consider, in the last line, it says, consider factors including vision, hearing, or other learning issues. Since we have had improvements in dyslexia in helping school districts, and it was a legislative consideration a couple years ago, I would like it to read, consider factors including vision, hearing, dyslexia, and other learning issues.
Any other discussion items? Or I'm sorry, discussion on this topic or questions?
Madam President, do I need to ask for an amendment, or can they just do that on their own?
This is just discussion. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, the staff will review and report back. All right. With no other questions or discussion, we're on to agenda item 7.4. Chair Lisa Fricke will report on behalf of the Rules and Regulation Committee meeting.
Thank you, Madam President. We met yesterday, February 1st. The Rules and Regs Committee members were me as chair, Elizabeth Techmeyer, Kirk Penner, that were present. The chair discussed the state board working agreements with the committee members to help the meeting move along smoothly. The committee members reviewed the rules report and discussed the length of time some of the rules take for final approval after they are approved by the board. We still have things that need to be signed by the governor and items that still need to go before the Attorney General's office. So at the request of the committee, NDE staff provided an overview of previously discussed revisions to Rules 10 and 14 from 2021. Staff presented potential educator certification policy changes. Committee members discussed the presented issues and potential solutions, and will continue the discussions that we had for future rule revisions and related certification. Committee member Kirk Penner presented a proposal for future revisions to Rule 10 related to Section 6, Library Media Technology. This item is on the business agenda for discussion. This concludes my Rules and Regulations report, Madam President.
Any questions for Lisa? All right.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, just a question. For information purposes, Lisa, could you share a little bit about what some of the ideas were for innovations related to teacher certification?
There were numerous ones. I would like to request that the sheet that Brad Dirksen handed out, it was itemized very clearly. So there were 5 of them. I don't have them memorized yet, but I think that information sheet, if I may request that every board member get that, it's very helpful. I'm glad you asked that, because I meant to ask Brad this morning if that could be done. And I think if you have any other innovative ideas, Brad would like to hear them. He asked that of our committee. He did a fantastic job reporting yesterday, as he always does. All staff do. And so I just would like to make that request. Will that help?
That does help. In addition to that, I hear that part of the discussion was related to possible future changes to Rule 10 in the future. Is that idea to go back to, we had 2 years ago, we had started moving toward a very comprehensive revision to Rule 10. So is the idea that we would go back to that revision and start working through that? Or were the ideas related to Rule 10 other than that?
I can share with what I perceive to be the next steps. That was mentioned because 2 years ago, when we were at the old site, we went to another building. Reg Lecty monitored and guided us through table groups working on changes needed to Rule 10. We came up with the idea as a AAA, so it'd be 3 separate rules instead of just one Rule 10. Would be accountability, accreditation, and assessment. Thank you. Poor brain lapses sometimes. But anyway, I think we will probably be getting back to that soon, according to what I interpreted the language and information given yesterday. And I think we all need to remember rules are a process, and they're in the process, I think, of behind the scenes gearing up for that future
possibility of us getting together and getting stakeholder input, other input to revise Rule 10, possibly AAA, 3 different buckets. And so I'm excited. I really am. I want to get that straightened out for school districts, and I think they might like that too. Did that answer your question? Yes. Okay.
Okay. We'll move on then to 7.4B. Kirk Penner, would you like to begin the discussion on this item?
Thank you, Deborah. I appreciate that. Hey, just wanted to bring this up for discussion and go through the proper channels on this rule revision. And I'm just going to go through with the revisions, and you can see the revisions. Anything underlined, it is added. Anything with a strike through it is removed, basic stuff. So you can see that I add, and I don't know if can you put that on the screen, Ryan, so anybody can see, or do you not? Yeah, I think it'd be better so everybody can follow along. Sorry about that. Just kind of start at the top there. So you can see that the quality indicator does not change. That was word that was already in the rule. And then the underlined about the mission, about assisting students and teachers to become effective users and ideas of information. And you can read the rest of that being lifelong learners. School shall provide an effective library media technology program through the employment of a qualified staff and acquisition. So nothing's touching the certification of a media specialist at all. And that next paragraph, I didn't touch that as well. So each school has a library media area, which is available to students during the entire school day. And everything needs to be properly cataloged. And then I added that the library media technology program shall consist of a balanced collection of print materials. Just kind of some references there. And then if you go down to the next paragraph, I took out the minimum requirements for those items, which I think, and I know Sherry has too, and Elizabeth, we've heard that from some superintendents, that's a requirement that they could work with their librarians better, or media specialists, and that no library should have any pornographic materials or sexually explicit content available to minor students. That is what I added. Next line goes into those minimums that are required every year, and on 6.01C and 6.01D. And then there's some definitions there on what a library is. Library is basically everything in that school. The school library is the official, what you would call your official library area. Technology gives an explanation. Pornographic, basically that's the Miller test in 1, 2, and 3, and that would eliminate, which I have no reason to believe there's Playboys and penthouses in our schools. But that is really what that is talking about there. And on letter E on the back side, sexually explicit content, which I reference in 6.01B on that last line. And I'm going to read it for one time, and then I know if this would ever get into rule, it's going to be the statute number not the words. Is that what we're doing now? And we're going to reference a statute number in the rule as opposed to saying it. So this is actually, this is a, where did that go? I added some early wording, but the definition of sexually explicit content comes from Nebraska statute 281463.02. It's the definition of sexually explicit that I'm adding here, or that has already been put into statute in the Nebraska legislature. So this was statute passed, this definition was passed. And so I'm going to read it one time, because I'm not here to read, I did that 2 years ago. I'm not here to read stuff, right? Okay, but I just think it's important that people know that what statute 281463.02 says. And so I added some early words here. Sexually explicit content, meaning detailed or expressed without vagueness, implication, or ambiguity, whether by text or image, including but not limited to real or simulated intercourse, whether genital to genital, oral genital, anal genital, or oral anal between persons of the same or opposite sex, or between a human and an animal, or with an artificial genital, real or simulated masturbation, real or simulated sadomasochistic abuse, erotic fondling, erotic nudity, or real or simulated defecation or urination for the purpose of sexual gratification or sexual stimulation of one or more persons involved, and visual depiction means live performance or photographic representations, and includes any undeveloped film or videotape or data stored on a computer disk or by other electronic means which is capable of conversion into a visual image. It also includes any photograph, film, video, picture, digital image, or computer displayed image, video, or picture, whether made or produced by electronic, mechanical, computer, digital, or other means. That is the definition for sexually explicit in Nebraska statute. Then I go down and give some more definitions, what a school district is, what a school, what a parent is. And then there are requirements of the school district. And again, it comes back to no library should have pornographic materials or sexually explicit content available to minor students. The question always comes on about sex education, and so those are exempt as long as those materials are purchased specifically for sex education classes. And then it talks about the library and media technology shall consist of a balanced collection of print materials, non-print materials, multimedia sources, and I think that's mentioned on the front page as well. And then on the policy, and I think a lot of schools already have this policy already, there should be a policy written, approved by the local board concerning the criteria to be used in the evaluation, selection, educational, suitability, and age-appropriate nature of materials for the library media technology program. The written policy shall contain criteria for selection, responsibility for selection, and guidelines for responding to complaints regarding materials in the library in the district. On 5, you've got to have a record of acquisition and classification and cataloging and a computerized library catalog or an alphabetically arranged card catalog using a recognized system, which everybody's going to have a digital, they're going to have an Excel file or whatever document for that. You have to have a central catalog on 6, and then the requirement is to copy and paste that link onto your local webpage, to Aurora Public Schools webpage of every book that you have in your library. And if you look at library on the front page, school library. School library is where it comes. School library catalog is the main libraries that building has. It does not include classroom libraries or the private library. The catalog doesn't. The rule about the sexual explicit content does, but the cataloging of the classroom does not. You can see there by August 24th, and annually the superintendent's got to say, hey, the public online school library catalog is online for the general public. At the bottom there, nothing in this section shall be construed to prohibit students from reading, owning, possessing, or discussing any book that they obtained without the assistance or encouragement of a school district, its employees, or libraries. Provided nothing in this part shall be construed to authorize bringing pornographic material or sexually explicit content on the grounds of any school district. So if there's a non-compliance of this rule, possible rule edit, you can see there in A, and I changed this to Nebraska taxpayer so we don't have everybody all over the United States and world looking for things that shouldn't be there. If you have an alleged violation, they take it to the local superintendent, and if he or she is not resolved to the satisfaction of the Nebraska taxpayer, a written complaint can be provided to our Department of Education that summarizes the allegation, including time, date, and location. The complaint to the Department of Education must also include a copy of any complaint to the local superintendent and his or her response. And then with 14 days of receiving a complaint, the Department of Education shall notify the school that we got it. And the Department of Education shall then conduct an investigation to determine whether a violation has occurred. The Department of Education's legal services shall notify the concerned Nebraska taxpayer and school district of the results. If the department concludes that there is a violation, the school district has another 14 days to request a hearing before the Board of Education. The Board of Education shall review the complaint and the record using a preponderance of evidence standard, may take additional evidence at its discretion, and shall publish an order with its findings of fact and conclusions of law. And then letter E is something I think we struggle with NDE, just agency-wide, is we have a school or schools sometimes that are in non-compliance of a rule, and there's no teeth to any of our rules because we've never taken an accreditation away from a school because nobody knows what that looks like. And if it happens to be, so that is something we talked about it briefly, not this Rules and Regulations Committee, but a time ago about, so what if they don't comply? What if, on a totally separate issue, what if they don't comply? And so that is something that needs to be addressed. And then if it's a teacher that's constantly violating the law, it says in here that we can pursue the suspension or revocation of the teaching certificate. So that's really the gist of it. It's just open for discussion here. Pros, cons, what you like, what you don't like, from that angle. And I will be quiet.
Thank you, Kirk. Anybody want to ask questions or make comments? Lisa?
Thank you, Madam President. We had two library media specialists visit with us this morning and shared information, one from the head of the Librarians Association. And I just want us to really think about what they had to say. I think that's very important. I have no further words at this time, for now.
Anybody else? Jacqueline?
The definition, sexually explicit content, what was the statute? Was it a criminal statute that you took that definition out of, or what was the context that was?
It was the Child Pornography Act.
But was it in the criminal, is it a criminal definition?
I can't answer that right off the top of my head without going to the specific.
What's the statute?
28-1463.02.
28-1463.02. I'm pretty sure chapter 28 is our criminal code, but I'll just double check. 28, the next one, Visual Prohibited Act. It shall be unlawful. Okay, so I can just tell you, without getting into any details, I would have some concerns initially about taking pieces of a criminal statute where people typically have the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt inserting it into this and then saying we're going to move to a preponderance of the I think that's what you said, preponderance standard. So that to me is an inherent conflict initially. I guess just the lawyer in me. The procedure, I think there's some problems with due process here. And to just give you one example, if something is not resolved to the satisfaction of the concerned taxpayer, that is very arbitrary of what would satisfy me versus what would satisfy somebody else. And so you are giving a lot of power to one individual to decipher what would make them satisfied. That's not a true due process standard. So I think that's a concern that I'd have. And then I could go on. So one here is if the department concludes that a violation has occurred or may have occurred. Okay, so if the department makes a determination that something may have occurred, then a school district now has the ability to request a hearing. Why would a school district request a hearing if we say something may have occurred? That would seem like the burden would then switch to the department to have the hearing to be able to approve whether something did or did not. So I'm not going to get into whether I like or dislike the language. I have some other concerns there about, I think one of them said a reasonable person. Again, reasonable. I believe I'm a very reasonable person. There's probably people here who don't think I'm a reasonable person. So that becomes a question. And then it says, considering the youngest age of students with access to the material. To me, access means the ability to get to a book. Well, if it's a school that's serving K through 12, and you have different sections in a library, I've been to a library lately, a couple. A child who is in kindergarten could still have access technically to a book that may not be age appropriate for that child. That doesn't mean that the book shouldn't be in the school, because maybe to a 10th grader or 11th grader that is appropriate material. And just because my younger sibling can access that book doesn't mean that the book should be removed from the entire school. And so I think, again, I could see some problems with that aren't necessarily consistent with how schools are set up or how libraries operate. So those are my initial concerns if you just wanted some feedback.
Anybody else? Patty?
Yeah, I guess I have a number of things I could say. It's interesting to me that library has been redefined to mean any employees in the district, right, who might have materials for students to use. So that means if a teacher has a book for literature, a literature class, that's considered a library. And I'm opposed to redefining something beyond what it truly is. So there's a lot of language in here that I think is ambiguous, and also I think is stretching the true meaning of things. My understanding from librarians I've spoken with is that most of them already use the Miller test or some version of the Miller test when they are selecting materials. My mom was a school librarian for her entire career, and she's 95, and she could still say to me, librarians are taught to use good judgment when selecting materials. And I used to read every single book that came into my library. And knowing my mother, I'm sure she did. Right? But I guess part of what I'm getting at here is I'm concerned that in rural development, such a critical piece is stakeholder engagement. I don't perceive that there's been any stakeholder engagement in the suggestions for development of this particular rule. This is not a rule that's being dictated by state statute, right? That's a different ball game. So it's very perplexing to me, because we have talked about on this board how we need to be transparent with our public and we need to get stakeholder engagement. And that's not happening with this. That's very, very concerning to me. You know, I appreciate having several librarians come to provide public comment. I got phone calls from citizens. I got emails from some librarians, all expressing some great concerns and stating that some of these things are already in place. As you mentioned, Kirk, a number of schools already have a policy related to libraries, and they vary probably in terms of their depth of what they include. But again, to me, that goes back to, that's why we have local school boards. There, back to Jacqueline, one of Jacqueline's points, there are some small schools that the school library is the community's library. You're putting that school district in a very awkward position with some of the things that are proposed in this rule.
Anybody else? Sherry?
Yes. I'm not sure where to start. I guess I think maybe some wording we could work on. But I want to respond to the intent of this last section of it. My priority is the well-being of our children. And there is much evidence of sexually explicit books in our schools. There's evidence of that. And I like the definition, even though it might need to, I don't know if it fits in statute or whatever, but the definition, I think, is very clear to people selecting the material what we mean. And I think that needs to be, that's very clear, and I think that's helpful. And I appreciate the work of media specialists and their knowledge. But I don't think that they could be the only safeguard to ensure that sexually explicit materials are not accessible to our students. I don't want to give one person be the only safeguard. So that's why I appreciate a lot of the part of this policy change. Let's see. I have heard from some media specialists. But one teacher that I heard of was an elementary teacher with 2 young children of her own. And she said to me, schools must have high standards for what is available to students in their libraries, for parents are not there to help their children select books. And I appreciated that comment. I'm glad that this does not include classroom libraries, other than not having the sexually explicit material in their rooms. They don't have to catalog them. That would be very burdensome for classroom teachers, and I would not want to burden them like that. That's important. Those are some of my initial comments, I guess.
Anybody else? Are you finished? Sherry, or did you want to keep going? Anybody else want to comment?
I can wrap it up. Unless you want to comment.
I'm going to comment. Is that okay? But I want to make sure everybody else. Have you been able to say everything, Sherry?
You go on if I think.
Okay. First of all, I just want to thank Kirk, because I feel like Kirk is doing for the State Board of Education what Taylor Swift is doing for the Kansas City Chiefs. And so, like, keeping people paying attention to us. So, all right. That is said in humor. Yeah, people do pay attention when there's controversy. But at the same time, I'm not going to get into the language of this, because I feel like there's a great deal of process concerns about it. Some of my process concerns come from, we just unanimously approved reviewed. I think we spent a year reviewing Rule 10, and as a board, all of us here today unanimously approved the Rule 10 changes. And so it just seems like if this was really the big issue of the state, that it would have come up, we would have heard from people at that time, and we didn't, at least not significant in numbers. And I know my next question will offend, but I still come back to, when I hear one or two superintendents might say something, I always come back to when they only represent less than 1% of the students in this state and they're not on public record, I don't think that it needs to be heard, it needs to be considered, but we have a very large state with very divergent needs, student needs, and my last point is I would say that every single one of us, I think I heard when we campaigned, we all believed in local control, that was a key. And I strongly believe that, this is a local control issue. We have our Rule 10 regulations, and at some point we have to leave it to the local school districts to determine what is best for their libraries, because the libraries in my district might have different thoughts and feelings than libraries in other places across the state. And so I'm sorry that my joke didn't land very well. Kirk laughed. I don't think anyone else did, but anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
I'll just wrap it up here. So I'm trying to get sexually explicit content out of our libraries. There's no justification to have it in any of our libraries, and it's in some school libraries. It's a fact. I spent 2 years ago, my second meeting on this board, reading it. So don't tell me it's not there, first of all. In some libraries. We do have control over Rule 10, and we do have control over library facilities and materials as one of our powers as a State Board of Education. It's listed in state statute. I grabbed the state statute to Jacqueline's point, to give a definition of what sexually explicit is, because I don't want to be vague. I don't want to be subjective. I want to give the librarians and the school boards and the school superintendents something they can go to and say, I can't have this in my library. Just like the health standards, where we thought, school said, hey, I need something to go off of. We need to write health standards. So schools are always looking to NDE for guidance. And my point in this is to give these schools guidance for what not that I need to, or shouldn't have to, even touch this, but it does appear in some of our school libraries. It's just a fact. And so that's what I'm trying to do, is trying to garner some type of consensus. I'm trying to work with the rest of the board to keep sexually explicit content out of our schools. And it's there in some school districts, and we need to be consistent. Some of the stuff that was mentioned, I'm pulling straight from state statutes on some of the lawyer stuff that you were talking about that's over my head a little bit, pulling it verbatim right off state statutes on the procedural side of it. But at no point should sexually explicit stuff be in the schools, ever. But it is. And why? I don't know why it is. I have no idea why you would want to put sexually explicit stuff that I read 2 years ago and continue to see in Nebraska schools. And I named the schools, whether it's text or graphic images, why we feel the need to do it. Why do we? Because it's there. And so what I'm looking to do, and this is just discussion, and I don't have a whole lot more to say, is I'm looking for the seven of us, I know Elizabeth's not here, to come to some agreement on how to keep sexually explicit material out of our libraries. We have the authority as the State Board of Education to do it. It's one of our State Board of Education powers and duties, 79-1601, and go from there. And so we will see what happens over the next month, but if you have any suggestions, but if it's just going to be picking at it and saying you don't want anything to do with it, that's an interesting stance. But I appreciate everybody's input, very good input. But I'm just, at some point you got to acknowledge this is in some of our libraries. And I still have people saying it's not.
I will tell you my stance is going to be I will not agree with this. So I won't just pick at it. I'll just flat out tell you. I took many sociology classes. I read lots of books when I was in high school. There are a lot of conversations that happen about rape, women, the power dynamics of that, and wars, how women have been used and controlled, and all of those types of things are in history books, sociology books that are in libraries and high schools. It was important for me to read about that as a teenager, as a young adult. It's important in how I live my life and how I teach what I teach my children. And when you get to this parsing of sexually explicit content and whether or not there's some academic value in what a reasonable person would believe, I believe you start to, it's written very broadly, and you can start to get to important material that students need to read, they need to understand, they need to learn about to be an educated society. And so because of that, I think it's a local control issue. I think it's a discretion issue for librarians, and I can't support something so broad because when you get very broad, you don't get to the nuances of things. It's too much, and kids may actually miss out on great learning opportunities that they need. So I won't support it.
Madam Chair.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. And Jacqueline, I believe all the topics you mentioned there, I think they can be brought up and discussed without them being sexually explicit. So I value all the topics that you said without being in explicitly, sexually explicit text. And again, Mr. Penner, you mentioned that we have the authority, but I think we not only have the authority, but we have the obligation to oversee that districts do what needs to be done to protect our students from sexually explicit materials. So we have the obligation, not just the authority. And we need to protect the hearts, minds, bodies, and souls of our children. And that is way important to me. So I will fully support this bill. There may be some changes to make with numbers and whatnot, but I will, for the protection of our children, I'm on this.
Kirk, I think I heard you mention that the procedure comes from state statute. Could you cite what state statute that is? Not Nebraska. Okay.
I guess one of the things that came to mind when I heard you talking also is I feel like if we take the temp around the state, there are board members being removed from local school boards for being extreme on this kind of an issue. And I think that my feedback that I receive is that not only is this a local school board issue, but parents want to be respected. And when we try to regulate something that should be a local school board issue, that local professionals who are skilled at making these decisions, and we try to step in, I mean, that is something that is getting parents irate across the state. At least that's what I'm hearing. Lisa?
I don't think I can support this. Sure, we all want to safeguard our kids. That's at the heart of who we are as mothers, as parents, and citizens in Nebraska. It's already in state statute, the definition.
And it's up to the local school boards and media specialists, the people that know their community. And no, we don't want explicit things that are harmful to kids in our libraries. But I also trust local boards, parents, and the library media. And those few schools that you mentioned that have it, those local boards need to make a tough decision. I don't know, I just have concerns about putting all of that in Rule 10.
That's fine. It'll come to the board for a vote next month, so you'll have your opportunity to vote no on what I have here.
A question. I don't remember a rule coming to us this fast in a process without other considerations from public input or some kind of input. Why are we rushing this without hearing from superintendents, local boards? Why are we not taking our time with this? We've had concerns about some of the wording. I think we all want to safeguard our kids. And when we tend to rush things to production without looking at each part, whether it's a factory line or whether it's, whatever it is, rushing to an end product without input, without longer time to think about this, that seems counterproductive to me.
Patsy? My head hurts from listening here. Okay, Kurt, you say that it's in some schools, and have you been transparent with that as far as with the schools identifying it and saying this shouldn't be in here?
Yeah.
Okay, and what do they reply to that?
A lot of times they take it out, but sometimes they leave it in because they will say it has broader meaning.
What do you think? What do you think of what's happening? I'm just trying to formulate in my head things. What do you think of the repercussions of some of this, like the scarlet letter being cut from literature classes and William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet? What do you think about that?
Is that sexually explicit or is that sexual content?
I suppose it depends on when you're reading it, what you're thinking.
Well, the sexually explicit.
Can't control that.
Yeah, the sexually explicit definition explains exactly what sexually explicit is in this.
But do you see how that's being misconstrued?
I'm trying to make it totally objective. That's why I'm saying sexual content's not in this rule. It's sexually explicit content is in the definition.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? Sure. I'm just curious, because I'm happy for this to come to the board meeting next month as an action item, so we could take a vote on it. But my question is, what's the process of how this is coming to the board next month as an action item? So typically, something is raised in a committee, and then a committee then moves the item to recommends moving the item to the board as an action item, or the committee chair works with the board president or with the commissioner to say, here's what our committee's agenda is going to be. And so I did miss the Rules and Regs Committee meeting yesterday, so full transparency, since we're being transparent. So I'm just curious, when you say it is coming, was that a discussion that happened within your committee that they said, we as a committee are bringing this to the board as an action item the following month? Or was this did you work with the president to have this put on the agenda this month as a discussion item, and then you're going to then go outside of the committee directly to the president next month to have the action item? I just don't know what procedure, because you said that very definitively, and I think historically we've said the committee chair has said, I'm bringing this as a discussion item, and then we will bring this as an action item coming from the committee. So I'm just curious about that procedure.
Yeah, I just working through the process, and there's nothing in the law that says that the committee has to bring it out. The committee, you don't vote in committee to bring something out.
But an agenda has to be formed, and so who is putting that action? We're not operating under the law. We're operating under our board's bylaws and procedures. So operating under the law for me means something else maybe. But someone creates our agenda each month, and so who is putting it on the agenda as an action item is my question.
I am.
Through who?
Through an email to the board president and Dr. Four and Dr. Maher, and I just include everybody on that.
So pursuant to our board bylaws, you will be making a request to bring this as an action item?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'd have to read the bylaw again.
So I'm curious, have you spoken with our legal counsel about the legality of this? Because I'm beyond how I feel about it. This has got all types of due process problems, and even if this board were to approve it, it still has to go to the Attorney General for review.
Mm-hmm.
And have you had that vetted?
I grabbed that straight off a state statute, so it has been vetted. Have I personally vetted?
This is not a Nebraska state statute. We have an Administrative Procedures Act that outlines our administrative procedures. This is not the Nebraska Administrative Procedures Act.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to wait till I got input before I went anywhere, and I think I got the input that I kind of expected. And
so you would then make amendments, and before you brought the amendments to the board for discussion on those amendments or to a committee, you would make amendments and then bring it next month as an action item. I'm just following what you're telling me.
I'm just saying, if there were changes that needed to be made, I would insert the changes. Doesn't sound like there's going to be any changes to be made.
Okay, got it.
It's me again. So at the beginning of the meeting, I heard a lot of discussion in this part of the table about consistency, and consistency of process, consistency of a lot of the things we do. And so the consistent way for a rule change to occur is certainly not what's happening, what you are doing. Instead, this is a question, I guess, you came on the board with this issue on your radar, because I know in your second board meeting, it was memorable. And then we spent a whole year reviewing Rule 10, and this never came up, and then you voted to support the Rule 10 changes that we made. And so here we are, a few months later, and now you're rushing, you're not following what you say is your belief that we have a consistent process for things, and this is kind of, even though you might have the authority to do it, it's not the normal process, and you're rushing through a discussion item and a vote, on something that we could have done, had last year when we were updating Rule 10. And so I guess I just am curious, just because that question has been asked of me.
I've got one more question, because now I'm all kinds of confused. Maybe I should just let this go, but if this came to the board as an action item, I know what our rules process is. What do you anticipate that the next step is if this were voted on and approved?
Well, I was hoping for some consensus on how to, being transparent, that we could make this rule work and see if we could keep sexually explicit content out of our libraries, and that's not happening, okay? So that's not gonna happen at all, so there are no changes to be made. But Rule 10 is sitting on the governor's office, sitting somewhere ready to be done. That would have to be totally done first, and then I'd have to come back with this and add to it later. But I was expecting actually some thoughts that, hey, that's a good idea to keep sexual explicit content as defined out of our school libraries, and I only have one, and so I don't know what to do with that. But my plan is to bring it out of committee. Over the last 2 years, I've said, hey, does anything have to be voted out of committee? And it doesn't have, because we don't take votes in committee. And instead of just bringing this like I did 2 years ago, just to a normal meeting and putting on the agenda, I thought I'd follow the kind of the process through the committee, bring something out of the committee instead of in February, like Deborah said, that I just came with this as an action item for the full board. So I thought I was making an extra step to do it properly, and I was getting some. I just think that's the right way to do it. I was trying to do it the right way.
Well, I guess typically, procedurally, this is very hard for me because we've been working very, very hard on the Rules and Regs Committee, and I've been very, very hard on the department about sticking to a procedure with our rules. And we're just at the point where I think the department and the board are moving in sync on what our rules processes are going to be. From the time that they bring the committee the rule, the committee reviews, and it doesn't have to start with them, the committee reviews the rules, and then we want the full board to have an opportunity to see that before it's then published for 30 days, which is it has to be published to get public input. Then we get that input back, and then if that's, depending on what that input is, then ultimately the full board would then vote on that after there's been public input. And so there's just so many processes. So that's when I said, when you're bringing us an action item without it even having gone to the public for some type of review, it's like, what point in that process do you see yourself in? Because I don't know, because we're not in the normal process.
Madam President? Kirk, your statement about there's only one person that cares whether or not pornography is in our libraries or not, that's not true. It's because I don't want it to get into the hands of students who shouldn't have it. It's about the rule and about the procedures that we already have in place in our schools with local boards and constituents who can go through a policy to say they have an objection about a book and resolve it. Plattsmouth is a good example of that. So to tell me that I don't care about what gets in the hands of students that are not mature enough to handle it bothers me.
You have every authority on this board to help with this rule. You have every authority to help. You're an elected official in your district. You could help do this because we have the authority on the State Board of Education. And so we're talking a lot about process here, talking about process, and we're not talking about the issue, and that's concerning. But if we're going around in circles here. But I sure could have brought it a different way, but I brought it through committee. And ultimately, you do have a say in keeping explicit sexual content away from kids. You do. It's under our board responsibilities, but I'll just leave it at that.
Deborah, can I say something? I do have a say. If I walked into a school in Omaha and there was a book in Omaha Public Schools that I didn't like, I'd pick up the phone and I'd call Jane Erdenberger, who is my representative on the Omaha Public Schools Board, and I would go to my public school board meeting and I would make it known. And then if the action that I wanted didn't happen, when Jane comes to knock on my door to ask for my vote this year, I will tell her no, and I will vote for somebody else who I think will listen to me and all of the other constituents in our area. That's the current process that I would use. And I do care about kids, and I do care about what's in classrooms, but I also know that words like reasonable person could lead to some really broad results that could be just as harmful as they are impactful.
May I just add that the current process is not keeping sexually explicit material away from our children. I know that. I've seen lists and lists and lists of books in numerous public schools. So what we're doing now is not keeping our children safe from harmful materials. So I don't know about the process, maybe we need to work on. I don't know if we need to ask Ryan to make comment about the process, if the process is not right and we can change the process a little bit, extend it a month, I don't know. But I'm wondering if there is a faulty process here, if we need to do something different. I mean, may I ask, should I ask that or not? Would you be willing to answer that or respond to my wonderment?
I think I might go back to be at the next meeting, Mr. Penner.
It would be a motion to basically in principle agree with the way we are heading to try and eliminate sexually explicit. It wouldn't be these exact words. That's why I was hoping for some edits and a direction that I could maybe, or the committee, the Rules and Regulations Committee could get.
So let's say that plays out and that motion were adopted at next month's meeting to move forward is what I'm hearing. Then the rule revision would still have to go through the Administrative Procedures Act, which includes preparing a hearing draft and putting that hearing draft out for notice to the public and having a hearing, and the final draft of that would have to come back before the board for approval. And as was mentioned or referenced earlier, the process would not be able to start. So the board might signal at next month's meeting that it would want, if it were to signal at next month's meeting that it wanted to proceed with that, it's really a direction to the commissioner to say, we want to move forward with this. But we wouldn't be able to start on the process officially through APA until the governor signed or didn't sign the current revisions to Rule 10. So that's how this would carry out if there was an affirmative vote to move forward with it. Does that make sense?
May I? That makes sense to me, Ryan, but Kirk, when you said what your motion was going to be, it did not have anything to do with rule change. You said agree in principle. That to me has nothing to do with the rule. And when I hear that we would agree that this is something we all believe in, that sounds more like a proposal for a position statement.
All right. Agenda item 10, go to the order. This section of the agenda is intended for board members to offer informal observations of the work of the State Board. Board members may make brief announcements about attendance at future events for the purpose of informing other board members. No business or motions or suggested actions of the board may be offered at this point in the agenda, nor should board members engage in substantive discussion about other agenda items or introduce new agenda items. Do we have anything for the good of the order? All right, agenda item 11. Thank you to those who attended in person and who tuned into the broadcast. The next meetings of the State Board of Education are scheduled for March 7th and 8th in Lincoln, Nebraska. The February 2nd, 2024 State Board meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Oh, I get to hit the gavel. It's lunchtime. Oh, that was sort of a...